yay, man. All out of options, nothing to choose. I pissed out on Netflix, I'm sick of the news. I'd sign up to Sky, but I don't wanna pay. I've been on furlough since May. Never go and listen to a cockney attitude. Ooh, breaking away. Got to find a better way. I'd rather watch Auf Wiedersehen again and listen to what these old men have to say.
Hello, and welcome back to Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. And this is episode number 21.
Whoa.
George, I'm a little bit sad. We're on the back 9. So there's 40 episodes. Last week was so this was the midpoint was midweek. So we've done the first 20. We're on to 21. We're on the downward slope, mate. Getting a little bit sad and a little bit emotional.
Yeah.
So we are back in Newcastle. So this allows me to go back to our previous tradition when we used to say Guten Tag when they were in Germany. When they were in Derbyshire, there wasn't much to say. I don't know what the hello for like good morning. So anyway, we're back in the Toon, so we can go Auf Wiedersehen Pet.
Yeah.
So George, with a massive sense of dread, however, I'm sure that your new item of clothing is going to be on the agenda.
Yeah.
What's been happening for you this week, my friend?
Well, bit of online ordering, more stuff I don't need, but due to extreme boredom, I've been clicking away, and I have my new purchase on. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I've got the track top. You know the track top that he wears in the business. It's the same track top as that. It's blue with a Sergio stripe and the white and the red collar. So yes, I'm pretty jealous that you've got that. That looks pretty.
Well, they're doing a special deal at the moment. It's under 40 quid, so you can get on there and get one. Yeah. Yeah,
but the problem is, I'm one of them people. Like, if you've got it, I don't fucking want it. I want exclusive shit. I know saying I want exclusive shit from the website that sells the most number of 80s related sportswear. So yes, there are probably thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not maybe hundreds of thousands of people out there wearing the same shit. But the last thing I would ever possibly want is for me and you to turn up at the same same place wearing the same shit.
We'd clash. That'd be no good.
We'd look like a right fucking pair of melts. So apart from purchasing, anything else that you think is worthy of letting our listeners know about?
Well, not really. I'm going to do a little trip to Seaside tomorrow. So we are recording. George has had me on a time frame this week. He was forcing me to record nice and early, but it's always good to get it out the way. So George, tell our listeners when you say the Seaside, whereabouts you going? Ramsgate.
Ramsgate, that's in Kent, isn't it?
Yeah, I hear it's a bit, Rocky? Anyway, it was a mate of mine who chose it, so it boasts the biggest Wetherspoons in the country, so that would be the highlight of my day.
Right up your fucking street, George.
Yeah.
Biggest Wetherspoons in the country.
Oh, it's huge.
So does that mean it's got the most amount of people on benefits in the country as well?
Yeah. And I'm sure there's a even longer walk to the toilet.
Yeah, fucking hell, mate. You better wear hiking boots if you're going there. The fucking stairs will be like 14 miles long in that.
Yeah.
So, well, you will have to give our readers, I keep saying readers, you'll have to give our listeners and watchers a report next week of what you think of the Ramsgate Wetherspoons. Well, they'll still be doing table service, so at least you won't have to walk to the bar.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
So, I myself went to my friend's wedding, as I was mentioning last week. So on Friday of last week, we had a bit of a double celebration. So one of my very good friends, he has been residing at Her Majesty's pleasure for the last 5 years, and he got out of jail approximately 9 a.m. on Friday, and got married at 6 p.m. So he was a free man for 9 hours.
Yeah.
Went from being locked up in a cell to being locked up in a marriage within a very.
I must say, his bride was absolutely beautiful.
She's a
lovely looking girl. Yeah,
she's an absolute stunner. Yeah, she's an absolute stunner. So, he's a bit of a unit. So as you can see from the pictures, I mean, I'm not small. I'm 6'3", and a bit of a lumpy self. He's 6'6".
Sure.
And he's a bit of a lad. So there were some very, 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 very tasty looking individuals at the actual wedding itself. So obviously he spent as somewhat of a naughty boy, he spent a few years in the shovel. Several of the wedding guests had also been residing at his pleasure at some point in the very recent past. So it was myself and my young lady.
Oh, very nice as well, I must say.
That's my new young lady. Very, very pleased with that one. And we went to the wedding, and we had a little bit of a game of guess who's been in prison. So that was quite funny. And in the end of it, it was basically nearly everyone. No, but yeah, it was a good laugh. But the venue was beautiful. So it was in this, like, it was one of them sort of. It was in Banbury in Oxfordshire, and it was in basically a field, but it had big a marquee tents, and then it was like in this valley. So you go through the door and you go down this road into this valley, and then straight in front of you you've got this load of decking with chairs and these big marquee tents where that's where the actual ceremony was. And then you go down, and then there was a big fishing lake, and on the other side of the fishing lake there was all these big teepee bell tents where posh glamping. So you could, there was obviously people.
Well, seeing you hit a bit of traffic, didn't you, on the way down there?
Yeah, but check this out. This is the fucking ironic thing about it. So we left. We checked the sat nav, and it was an hour. It's an hour and a half, an hour 40 minutes door to door. So me being the anal timekeeper that I am, I'm like, right, well, let's leave. Let's make sure that we leave with plenty of time. So the ceremony was supposed to be at 5, so we left at 2, half 2. So so basically I left. I gave it was an hour and a half journey, and I thought I'll give it 2.5 hours. That'll get with there in plenty of time. Like I say, I didn't want to get there too early. I didn't want to be sitting there like a melt. So we got. I thought I'll get plenty of time. So anyway. We got onto the M40, and we were heading north towards Banbury, and we got to sort of Oxford, Bicester way. The fucking motorway just ground to a halt.
Yeah. I've seen the picture. Yeah, look.
And so it was that kind of that kind of grind to the halt where you get out your car and have a wander around and go to the
have a piss.
Yeah. Like the dude in the van in front of me was out. I was out. We were just having a chat and And anyway, so we were probably stuck there for a good hour, and there was ambulances and police cars and fire engines flying up the hard shoulder and whatnot.
You were getting a bit of stick about your trousers, but I thought they looked pretty cool.
Fucking tricks, weren't they?
I thought they were brilliant.
Well, that's another story. I'll tell you about them in a second. So, it said, the sat nav came up and it said, you've got to fuck off at the next junction, right? So they'd obviously closed the motorway and they were sending people off at the next junction. And I was like, well, whatever, we'll come off the next junction, at least it'll speed shit up and that. Anyway, by the time we actually got to the junction, when the traffic started moving a little bit, we literally were just about to come off at the junction and the police opened the road again. So it allowed us to carry on. So we've driven past the junction, and at the side of the road, there was 2 cars smashed to pieces. So it was obviously been a front and a back end smash.
Inconsiderate bastards.
And the front end of one car was totally collapsed and the back end of the other car was totally collapsed. So it looked like they'd hit each other pretty fucking fast. And then there was like a Jeep with a trailer, and the trailer was like on its side and upside down and what have you. And we were like, oh, that's anyway. So they're all being pushed over to the side of the road. Anyway, when we got there, obviously, like, you know, I was like, fuck, like, so I've got there at like 5:10. So, you know, like I say, a journey that should have taken an hour and a half took basically 3 hours.
Yeah.
And so we've turned up all late, like all stressed and what have you. And I fucking got there and I was like, where's Steve? And they were like, he's not here yet. I was like, oh, fucking hell, that's all right then. So my mate, he hadn't even arrived yet. And I said, I said, it was really bad traffic. Said there was a big smash on the motorway. And they went, yeah, that was the hog roast. So they'd had a hog roast fucking for the food afterwards. And the hog roast was in the back of the trailer that was fucking flipped over at the side of the motorway. So yeah, that fucked the food up no end. They still had burgers and stuff like that. Like they could do a little bit.
Yeah.
But the main event, like the hog roast, that was totally screwed. So that was that. But yeah, me trousers, right? So so it was predicting rain all week, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't want to wear I am a fan of a full length trouser. And I thought, I don't want to wear a full length trouser.
No, I thought you looked great. I thought you looked very smart. I looked at that picture. I thought, bloody hell, he looks good.
Yeah. So did I. Thank you, George.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was looking around and because I thought it was going to rain, I didn't want to get my trousers dirty. So I thought I'll get some of them 3/4 length trousers.
Yeah.
The fashion with the kids these days.
Yeah.
And
get down with the kids. Yeah.
And could I fucking find a pair in Reading? Could I? Bollocks. Went everywhere. Like, so on the Wednesday, I went to the Tuesday, and it was a Tuesday, went to fucking every shop in Reading and I couldn't find anything. And I knew I was wearing that blue shirt and I knew I had nice blue trainers, the Adidas Lacoms with a baby blue tongues and that.
Yeah.
So I was ideally looking for a pair of blue 3/4 length trousers. Anyway, I ended up going into Marksy's and I saw this pair of trousers and I thought they look fucking good. And they were like my waist size, which again is a bit of a struggle sometimes. And anyway, so I just thought, then I just realised, I thought, well, I know what I'll do. There's a little tailor's in the fucking arcade.
Oh, yeah.
I bought the trousers, which were normal length trousers, took them into the little tailor's, and the little tailor took them up a few inches. And
that's good. Yeah.
I thought they looked absolutely fantastic. And I thought, not only did they look fantastic, but I thought that my fucking idea of getting the tailor to take them up was a fantastic one. And and I put the picture up on social media and several people took the fucking piss out of me trousers. So if you were one of those people, fuck you. And then obviously the disappointment of the football. Well, let's rephrase that. Super proud of being runners up. You know, as I said in my Facebook post, you know, if before the tournament had started, someone had come up and say, I can guarantee you finish second.
Yeah.
You'd have fucking bitten their arm off.
Yeah.
Final at home at Wembley. You know, great performances. People would have taken that all day long. And then, you know, obviously there's a certain scumbag element that's decided to, you know, abuse those young lads that missed the penalties. So I very much doubt anyone that listens to our podcast would be such a twat. But if you know anyone that is such a twat, please do tell them. So yes, it just absolutely, you know, anyone that's, you know, abused those poor young lads in any way. I mean,
apparently they, what I've seen, the rare occasion that they actually get pulled in front of a court, they're pretty pathetic. They start crying and they're pretty pathetic people. Yeah.
Can you imagine what kind of person actually goes to the bother of, you know, writing a fucking Twitter post or an Instagram post to someone like mega famous and successful, using racial slurs, N-words and all that kind of stuff? You know what I mean? You're just like, you're talking the lowest form of fucking scumbag that lives in the mother's basement wanking over fucking porn with Cheeto dust.
Which is fair enough. But, yeah.
Cheeto dust all over their fingers and that, you know what I mean? Like, just, you know, absolute scum. Just the lowest, most pathetic specimens of life that you've ever come across. You know what I mean? Absolute virgins. You know what I mean? And just, you know, like, oh, I couldn't imagine being that pathetic to want to go and abuse someone. You know what I mean? Like, for that, you know, for that reason. You know,
the guy who was caught. He's an estate agent.
I saw that.
And he said someone hacked his account.
They always say that. The older my account got hacked. Yeah. Yeah, there was some prick for Savills, wasn't it? Yeah,
that's it. Yeah.
So, anyway, young George.
Yeah.
So, yes, an absolutely fantastic week for the football. Runners up, big up the England team. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Had a nice wedding, and you have got your new purchase on. So, all in all, not a bad wee week for us here at Auf Wiedersehen Again podcast. And you're off to Ramsgate. And so next week we will be looking forward to on the Witherspoons. And let's see if there's anything else. So if there is anybody out there in podcast land, any of our fantastic viewers or listeners who would like to offer us any guidance, advice, tips, hints, or straight up abuse, but don't abuse us because you'll be like one of them pricks who were abusing the footballers. We're equally as cool as those footballers. Don't forget that. So you can email us on Auf Wiedersehen Again at gmail.com. That's Auf Wiedersehen Again at gmail.com. Please do follow us on social media. Our Instagram at Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. That's Instagram at Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. Please do follow us on Twitter at Auf Again. That's Twitter at Auf Again. Please do like and share our Facebook page, Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. And if you could, invite your friends to like the page. So if you go to the top of the page, there's some tabs. Go to the community tab, click click invite friends, invite all, send invite, and that'll invite everyone you know to like the podcast page. So that's on Facebook, Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. Please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Search Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast, click subscribe, and then click that bell. And that will alert you to any new episodes. But if mine and George's gorgeous visages are not to your liking, or I mean, they should be. Tuning in for George's brand new Sergio Tacchini polo shirt should be exactly what. Oh, and he's got his tinny there. Fucking hell. He's not messing around today. So if mine and George, you are not too pleased or enamored with the state of our boats, you can just listen to us on all good podcast platforms: Spotify, iTunes, Anchor, Google Podcast, Breaker, and many, many more. And remember, our new episodes are released every Friday at 10 a.m. And our theme music, as always, is written and performed by Mr. Lee Dusky, the guitar man. So we please, we ask you to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, our sponsor for Auf Wiedersehen Again podcast is the fantastic people of Top Gun Tattooing of number 12, the Harris Arcade in Reading. Their website is topguntattoo.co.uk and their telephone number is 01189 968 667. And there are the two fantastic offers for the listeners and watchers of Auf Wiedersehen Again podcast. Offer number one, you can get yourself a 20% discount of any tattoo with Zach by going into the shop, or you can ring them up and you can say, Zach, I listened to the podcast, I want my 20% discount, and the code word is Hadaway and Shiteman. So if you contact Zach and tell him Hadaway and Shiteman, then you will get 20% discount. But not only that, Remember, Zach got a dermal facial piercing. He's got a bit of metal in his face there. And I've told him he looks like an absolute cock of the highest. So please, 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 even if you don't want a tattoo, please just ring the shop and abuse Zach and tell him he looks like a complete cock. He is waiting for your call. I have told him it is going to happen. So please, if any of our listeners or watchers just fancy getting a little bit drunk and abusing a prick with some metal in his face, Zach is the one. But remember, we also have the free offer of the free, that's right, free Neville and Lottie tattoo for every single listener. So if you would like a free tattoo, every single listener is entitled to a free tattoo. Terms and conditions apply. They are, you have to get the Neville and Lottie tattoo on your arm. And I'm sure that we've got 19 episodes left, George. That's 19 weeks. I've got 19 weeks in order to convince you to get the Neville and Lottie tattoo.
Yeah, it's got to be someone.
I reckon it's going to happen. I reckon it'll happen. I reckon it'll definitely happen at some point. So that is for all of our listeners. We also do our giveaway competition. So we have chosen a winner. Winner, chicken dinner. So the giveaway competition we have been running recently, and I do apologize to the winner of our previous competition, which was the picture from Arizona. I still haven't sent that out yet because I've been dead lazy. That's been like 3 weeks or something. But do trust me, that is going to arrive to you at some point soon. But the winner chicken dinner of this, which is our current prize, which is the black and white Magnificent 7 in the Barley-Moor. And the winner chosen at random, who posted on the Instagram page, is Lynn Anderson.
Oh, well done, Lynn.
Oh, well done, Lynn. Lynn Anderson, you are the winner chicken dinner of the black and white picture. And that will be going out to you hopefully quicker than the other one did, but we'll try and get them both sent out this week. So that means we have a new competition. And our new competition is once again a photograph, and it is the original Magnificent 7 picture. So if you want to win this original signed picture copy of the Magnificent 7 on the building site in Germany, provided to us by the fantastic Graham Teasdale, all you need to do is the same as always. I will be posting up on the social media pages the giveaway posts. And what do you need to do? You need to follow us on the social media. You need to like the post. You need to tag 3 friends in the comments, and you need to share that post. So you can either share it to your Facebook page, you can retweet it on Twitter, or you can share it to your story on Instagram, and you must tag us in that story so we can see that you've shared it. So that is it. The new giveaway competition, the original signed picture copy of the Magnificent 7 in Dusseldorf. That is the new giveaway from Auf Wiedersehen Again podcast. So those are all of the very boring bits out of the way, young George.
Yeah.
And we've got several cameos to speak about.
Oh, yeah.
Several locations to speak about. Actual, real Geordie locations.
Yeah.
And we have... Gets a little bit emotional at some points, don't you think, George?
Oh, it certainly does. Yeah, yeah.
So it is, this is, it's a bridging episode. So it's bridging us between, we finished up at Thornley Manor, and we are on our way to Spain. But as it says at the beginning, Brenda says sometimes things don't go smoothly when Annie Fraser is involved. So this is episode 21 of the podcast, and we are breaking down series 2, episode 8 of Auf Wiedersehen Pet, which is Marjorie Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Apparently this is the favourite episode of the writers, wasn't it? Yeah, Dick the Clement, the Frene, said this is their favourite ever episode, they said.
Wow. Well, there you go, George. Again, it's a good job you're here. I definitely didn't know that. So, yeah, to be honest, yeah, it certainly has its moments. But you know, from us, it is like I say, me personally, I feel it is a little bit more. They were trying to tug on the heartstrings a little bit more.
Yeah.
And show Oz in a little bit more of a sort of more, you know, as a more favourable light rather than just, you know.
But it had the highest audience figures as well. Over 16 million watched this one.
Well, fuck me, George.
16 million 17,000 watched this one.
I mean, if you actually think about it, right? So back in the day, there was what was a popular. I mean, you know, that's basically half the, like probably more than half the adult population of the country. So I mean, the population of the UK right now is what, about 60 million.
And they must have really got into it by now. So they're, you know, they're following. They're leaving the pub early to come home and watch it or whatever. So yeah.
I mean, that's, you know, that is a large amount, 16 million. I mean, you know, you just don't get that anymore, do you? I mean,
16,170,000. It looks like they watched it. Yeah.
Wow. Well, look, there you go then. So, as you said, written by Dick Clement and Ian Lafreniere, and was first broadcast on the 11th of April, 1986, to over 17 million, nearly 18 million people. Wow. So, they open up, and the first picture, like the first scene, is right in the middle of Newcastle.
Yeah.
So it is on Dean Street. So Dean Street goes down to the quayside, and as I've said before, when I was a kid, 17, I used to work in a pub on the quayside.
Yeah.
And this is, so I used to, that street, Dean Street, I used to walk down that street to work. And so you see the camper van, it goes down Dean Street towards the quayside, and then it cuts, and it's the glorious Tyne Bridge.
Yeah.
And we see Wayne's BMW heading over the Tyne Bridge, and Neville is driving the car. And Wayne says, you know something, Nev? I don't think I've ever been this far north. And Neville goes, you've never been to Scotland? And I'm assuming, have you ever been that far north, George?
Yeah. I've been up to Edinburgh as a kid, but it's somewhere I want to explore, you know, sort of now, my older years. Yeah. My flatmate here, he's Scottish. He goes up there quite a lot fishing and stuff. It's beautiful part of the world.
Oh yeah. Well, we will hopefully be heading up to Newcastle at some point. We'll go up there together, and we'll show you around. And we'll take you to Dean Street, and we'll drive over the Tyne Bridge. So he says, you've never been to Scotland? He says, no, I've never seen the point. And he says, it's grand up there, man, Scotland. It's beautiful. So is Northumberland. And he goes, just round here is a bit. And Wayne says, manky. And he says, give it a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they cut back to the quayside. So that is where they are. That's called the Akenside Hill.
Yeah.
And so the Dennis has parked the camper van on Akenside Hill, and Oz and Moxie are getting out, and obviously they're talking about Oz and Moxie are going to go round to Oz's, Marjorie's place, and Oz says, well, Marjorie hasn't got we pick up the conversation sort of halfway through, and obviously Dennis has been questioning him about, is he not going to ring Marjorie? And he says, well, Marjorie hasn't got a phone. And Dennis just says, well, you ring me, all right. And he says, right, I will do, call you later. And Moxie says, ta-ra. And Moxie questions Oz, and he says, hey, Oz. He says, you're separated from Marjorie. Won't this be a bit awkward, like? Even our Moxie is, can see the problems about to occur.
Mm.
And Oz, like, total innocent, he's like, what? Like Oz just like
nothing's happened.
Like it just as if being away for 2-3 years and then coming back is just the most natural thing in the world. And Moxie says, you know, just turning up on the doorstep, expecting a DOS for a couple of nights, particularly with a mate tagging along. And there'll be 3 of us when Barry arrives. And he says, it'll be our reap, man. How are you? He says, I'll read. He says, it's only for a couple of nights anyway. I'm still the bloke what pays the rent, don't forget. I mean,
yeah, well, that's questionable.
That's clearly a lie. And Moxie just goes, oh, yeah. He goes, well, he goes, I'll read. He goes, maybe not recently. And I can't.
I'm an official council tenant.
Well, this is it, but I rewound it a few times. And I think he says, I've been a bit humpty recently. Humpty or I don't know. I didn't hear the word he says. Something recently, he says. But yes, as you said, George, he says, I'm still the official council tenant. And Moxie says, did you see her when you got back from abroad? He says, no, she had the bairn over at her sister's. It's the bairn I want to see, actually. I brought him a real pucker jacket from the States. American football, dolphins on the front and that. And Moxie says, how old is he? And he says, how old is he? He says, let's see. He says, he was born the year Newcastle were relegated. So that'll make him 10 or 11. 10 or 11. And they go into the pub. So that pub, right, an interesting fact about that.
Yeah, go on.
So when I was 17, 18, like I say, I used to work in a pub literally 50 yards round the corner.
Yeah.
And that pub was like done out, was refurbished or whatever, and it had like this grand opening, yeah. And what they did is to promote it, they had these good-looking chicks outside handing out vouchers, right? And so what they did is they were, obviously I used to work there, so I would walk past these chicks, like, you know, like fucking 10 times a week. Yeah, so, and I got talking to them, and I would get a load of these vouchers, and they were just printed off vouchers for it was a £1 voucher off the price of a pint.
Yeah.
And I don't know whose fucking idea this was, but they were really stupid. What they didn't realize, well, whoever printed off the voucher was obviously not in fucking contact with whoever ran the pub, because there was also a point of the week when it was happy hour. So like nearly all bars in Newcastle had happy hour.
Oh, well, yeah, they used to in London as well, so they stopped it.
Yeah, so it was like from between like 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
And between 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock, it was £1 a pint.
Oh.
So it was £1 a pint, and you had your £1 voucher, and there was no. And these,
I wonder how much that was.
and so these dickheads, and nowhere on the voucher did it say, you know, not to be used in conjunction with
another. Yeah.
So basically, I was like, me and my mate, I used to get all these vouchers off these birds, and it even got to the point where we realised, I mean, the vouchers were just photocopies. So we then just went and
photocopied life.
And then we were going in, and we'd just go in, and me and my mate would just go in there and sit there and get absolutely slaughtered for absolutely fuck all money. It was absolutely brilliant. Yeah, so that was, I can't remember the name of the pub now, what it was called. So there was the one, like I say, it was on Aikenside Hill, and then there was the pub next door was called the Aikenside Traders. And I used to know the doorman there. It was a guy called Naz, who's from Wall's End.
Big Naz.
Yeah, he was a unit. And, you know, again, I was like 17, you know what I mean? I used to think I was cool because I knew the doorman. And then there was the chip shop over the road. So basically, you used to, when you were on your break at work, you'd go around the chippy to get a chip butty or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was, you know, that's when you'd grab all these vouchers and what have you. So there was a point in my life where that pub that Oz and Moxie go into there, they're all the fucking time getting slaughtered for absolutely free.
That's brilliant.
Anyway, so we cut to Neville's house, and Wayne's there, and Brenda, she says, I hope you'll be warm enough in that spare room, Wayne. We don't use it much, so there's no heating. And Wayne says, don't go to any bother, love. I feel bad enough about landing myself here as it is. And Neville says, it's only for a couple of days, pet. Be all right in Spain, eh? And she says, if you ever get there. And Wayne says, well, we've got the off, haven't we? That's why we dragged ourselves up here to your lovely metropolis.
And she goes, I know, and this is what I said before, she goes, I know, but things always don't go according to plan where Ali Fraser's concerned. And Neville says, we're still on the payroll, Pet, that's what counts. So I'm wondering, are they being paid for sitting at home? It must be. I wouldn't think Ali Fraser would be that keen, but. So then Wayne says, can I borrow your bathroom, mate? I want to freshen up a bit. And he says, straight up the stairs, and Wayne goes up the stairs. Anyway, then Brenda turns, her attitude changes somewhat rapidly. And she says, it's not very convenient, this, Neville. And he said, what isn't? And she goes, having Wayne here. And he goes, why not? And she goes, well, I've got enough to do with the hospital without coming home and cooking meals and things. And he says, you don't have to, man. We're used to looking after ourselves. He goes, well, why can't he stay at a hotel? He drives BMW, so it's not like he can't afford it. And she says, well, why didn't you tell us this last night? I phoned you last night to say, can Wayne stay? And you said, yes, fine. And she goes, well, he was standing next to you in the pub. Neville, I could hardly say anything else. So basically, Brenda's agreed to do something that she didn't want to do. And now she's fucking giving Wayne a tongue lashing. Now, some people might say that's a fairly typical attitude of some females. But not all. We're not sexist here at the podcast. But yes, that has been known. So, he says, I'll tell him it's not convenient. And then she changes her mind again. And she says, you will not. And he says, look, you don't have to get anything. We'll go and do in the pub and get a Scotch egg for what?
A Scotch egg.
And then she gets all posh. Did you notice she gets all posh?
Yeah.
And how does that make one look?
Yeah.
She goes, if I can't accommodate a guest in my own house. And Neville just straight up, he goes, this is one of them arguments that neither of us can win. And she backs down a bit and she goes, I'm sorry, Neville. She goes, it's just that we've seen so little of each other recently and now you're off to Spain. I thought it would be nice if we could have a couple of days on our own. And he says, look, I've been thinking if the money is as good as they say, I'll fly you and Debs out there towards the end of the job. Give you a little bit of a break and a bit of sunshine.
Yeah, she kind of cheers up a bit then, doesn't she?
Well, George, the promise of a foreign holiday would put a smile on anybody's face, wouldn't you agree? And she goes, really? And he goes, way aye, you deserve it, man. And she goes, very tempting, but what would the lads say? And he goes, I'd even give a toss what the lads would say. Brenda, kipping doing with that lot every night is not my idea of fun. And she says, it seems a bit extravagant. I mean, I wonder, is we not better off doing up the spare room? Anyway, we cut to Oz and Moxie, who are in a taxi, and they're obviously on the way to Oz's house. Now, so where they get out of this taxi.
Oh, it looks a bit desolate there. Looks a bit rough.
George, you could not be more accurate. So this is a Greenford Road, and that is, and the block of flats is called Wardropper House, which is in the east end of Newcastle, in a place called Walker. And I mean, back in the 80s, that particular area was one of the most deprived areas of Newcastle.
Jesus, yeah. Well, I must say, it did look it.
Yeah, I mean, no disrespect to any of our listeners from Walker, but it was rough as a monkey's.
Is it still there? Is it still on the go?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I haven't been there for many, many years. I remember when we were kids, I was talking about this to my mother earlier, because I was asking her some advice about something which we're going to talk about later.
Yeah.
I was speaking to my mother early, and it's my mother's birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, my mother. Anyway, so I remember when we were kids, there was the tall ships race came to Newcastle, and obviously, it was a big thing that, you could go down, everyone wanted to go down onto the riverside and watch it. So there was one particular area. So my mother used to work as a school teacher in Walker. Someone told her that you could go to this place that was very near the river and get a good view of the boats. And this particular place happened to be Pottery Bank in Walker. And Pottery Bank is fucking, I mean,
one of the roughest areas in Newcastle. You know what I mean? Proper fucking like rough. And
I mean, when I think of Newcastle, to be honest with you, the first thing I think of is Get Carter. You know, and that's it. You know.
Well, my mother will tell you a story. So in Get Carter, there is when he gets off the train and he goes into the pub.
Yeah, in a straight glass. Yeah.
That's a real pub. Well, that was a real pub. That was the original Yates's Wine Lodge in Newcastle.
Yeah.
And my mother tells this story about there was a fella. They used to go in there on work dues, right? And I mean, apparently it was like full of brasses and fucking criminals and fucking what have you. And apparently, like all the brasses used to be like a bit fucking shady, like with any of the fucking women that were coming in there, thinking they were fucking, you know, treading on their toes and whatever. Until like my mother and all her school teacher mates would go in this fucking bar, and once they realised there were a group of school teachers, the brasses were all right. But then there was a bit of friction between the brasses and the school teachers. I'm like, anyway, she told me this story. Apparently, there was a guy that used to go in there, had this like sheepskin coat, and like it was older than fucking God's dog, this sheepskin coat. And he was filthy, this geezer, you know. He was obviously like, you know, whether he was just a dirty fella or a manual worker, but like apparently, so like the pockets of the sheepskin coat, where this geezer walked around with his hands in his pockets all the time, black, like around the edge of the pocket was just black. You know what I mean? With filth and grease and dirt and whatever. And apparently one night somebody tripped over and spilt a pint, and it landed in this and it went into the bloke's pocket and didn't come out. Like apparently, like the inside of the pocket was that covered in grease and grime and filth that it was watertight. And so someone's fucking spilt this pint into his pocket, and the pint was just stayed in the pocket. That's Yates's Wine Lodge.
Well, I also read in the scene in Get Carter in the pub where the two women fight. That's real. They just let it go on. If you remember, she pulled her hair.
Oh yeah.
No, that was a real fight. They just kept it in, you know.
Yeah, well, apparently like I say, it was a pretty fucking rough old boozer. I mean, we're talking this was, you know, in the fucking, you know, my mother used to go there like in the 80s, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I mean, obviously, Get Carter was filmed, what, in the 70s, wasn't it? Or even the 60s?
I think, maybe early 70s, yeah. It's one of my favourite films. It's a brilliant film.
You're a big man, but you're out of shape.
yeah, you're out of shape, yeah.
So anyway, getting back. So like I say, so the taxi pulls up. It's in Greenford Road, which is in Newcastle. It's in Walker. It's in the East End of Newcastle. Yeah, in a proper rough kiss me arse area. Now, they actually do they do say that it's in Gateshead. They mention that Oz's flat's in Gateshead. This isn't in Gateshead. This is in Newcastle. So they get out the taxi. You know, the Moxie's like, you know, the cheers mate, and Oz is, what's the damage? And he says it's £3, and he gives them £3.50. He says there's 3.5. And he says tar, and then the Moxie, I don't know whether he's taking a piss or whether he's from a worse area in Liverpool. He goes and he looks up and he goes, very nice. What floor you on? And he goes, the 4th, and he goes, nice view. Then he goes, he goes, at night, you know, he says, when you're standing on the balcony with your martini tumbler, clocking all the twinkling lights down below, you could Varney be in Manhattan, as long as you keep your eyes shut, like. And if you notice, when they walk through the estate, there's somebody hanging out of the window, like watching what's going on.
All right.
You know, you've got to realise, you know, when they were filming this, these people were by then they were mega famous, weren't they?
Yeah.
So they'll have been, you know, they probably didn't want anyone sticking their head out the window, but they probably, like, you know, like at the very first episode when they were all lining the streets in the big market and that.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so they cut to the door of the flat, and so the actual door of that flat, that's in Nottingham. It's not in Newcastle. So it's called Mansfield. Was it Mansfield Court or Mansfield House?
Number 23, I think.
Yeah, and it's in Nottingham. I don't know why he says home sweet home, And then he pulls a bag of things out. He goes, do you want a lozenge? I don't know where he's got the lozenges from. And he goes, yeah, great. So anyway, he opens the door with a key. He walks in and they enter the living room. And there's a man sat there. And he says to Oz, he says, who the hell are you? And Oz laughs. He goes, who am I?
Hey, Douglas. Douglas.
He goes, who are ye more like it? He goes, who are ye more like it? I think that's it, isn't it? He goes, your feet under the table quick enough. Your feet under the table quick enough. Oz hasn't been there in 3 years. Hasn't been there in 3 years. And he says, your feet are under the table quick enough. Aye. He says, didn't he look in? He goes, and then he says, look at this, 26-inch pie. You can't pay for that, did you? Now, obviously, he's confused the bloke. The bloke thinks he's a bailiff now. He goes, now, hey, there might be a couple of weeks behind with the payments, but that does not give you the right to barge in here as if you own the place. And then Oz again laughs. He says, I do own the place, actually. Mind, I hardly recognise it. Like, you've done a nice job with the decorating. So he's been very complimentary there, Oz, about the decorating job. And the bloke says, do you mind telling me who you are? And again, Oz laughs. He thinks it's hilarious. He goes, who I am? He goes, ask the last man. She'll tell you who I am. And so then now, your bloke here reckons that his bird's been, he's now getting paranoid ideals that his Doris has been playing away. And he goes, oh, will she? And he goes, yes, she will she. And he says, Jean, get yourself in here. And Oz goes, who's Jean? Anyway, Jean walks in and Moxie says hello. So,
Mr. Knees Welsh.
Exactly. So let's just take a break for the second. So the two people that we are currently looking at are, so the bloke, Douglas.
Donald McBride.
Played by Donald McBride.
Spender, crocodile shoes. Yeah.
There you are. There, George, you are 100% correct there. Not the most prolific actor, but 20 credits. Casualty, Spender, The Bill, Harry with Michael Elphick, Crocodile Shoes, Emmerdale, and Biker Grove. And he was actually, it said on Biker Grove that he played one character, and he also was the casting director as well. So I think he's obviously, does a lot of stuff behind the scenes anyway. So yeah, so that was him, and his good lady wife is the fantastic proper Geordie Denise Welch. So
she's the goddaughter of Ian Lefrene.
Oh, is she?
Yeah.
Fuck, but George, you're coming up with some absolute crackers.
I've little to do here.
You've had some absolute corkers today, mate. You're on fire. Well, she was married to Tim Healy.
Yes. Two kids, I think. One or two kids.
Tim Healy's wife at some point. And she has 43 credits on IMDb, including Biker Grove. She was Spender's wife in Spender, so she had a big part in Spender. She was in Harry with Michael Elphick. She also had a big part in Soldier. She was in 367 episodes of Coronation Street.
Yeah.
She was in The Bill. She was a big thing in Waterloo Road. I never watched that, but that was...
No, neither did I.
She was in Benidorm, Casualty, Holby City, EastEnders, Doctors, and she's currently been in 42 episodes of Hollyoaks.
And she's recently fallen out with Piers Morgan quite a lot.
Well, that's easy to do. He's a bit of a prick. So, but however, not only has she got 43 credits as an actress on IMDb, she has 93 credits for being herself. And that includes...
On Loose Women, yeah.
Well, do you know how many episodes of Loose Women she's done?
How many?
Have a rough guess.
Oh, I don't really watch it, but I couldn't even guess. Go on, tell me.
676 episodes of Loose Women. I mean, she's been on like every fucking game show.
Well, she's like the perfect panelist because she doesn't come backward at coming forward. She likes to say things, so she's the perfect one.
So she was on. So those self 93 credits. She's obviously been on a lot of stuff like game shows and celebrity game shows. She's also been on Dancing. Was it Dancing on Ice, or was it one of those, or was she?
Oh God, didn't watch that.
One of them. She was on Celebrity Big Brother. I tell you what, she has done a hell of a lot. Yeah.
And she's been through a lot of personal issues as well, hasn't she?
Yeah. I mean, most people have, but she just happens to be one of them people that fucking broadcasts it across the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you remember on Big Brother when she was in the hot tub with her tits out and everything? Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. Again, you're saying not backwards and coming forwards, mate. In more ways than one.
Oh, I'm sure she must have a big pair of tits.
I mean, I can't bring them. I mean, I'll tell you what, George. I'll leave that up to you to Google.
Yeah, I'll Google that one later. Yeah.
There's a little bit of research and homework for you to Google. I expect a picture in my WhatsApp inbox.
Yeah.
Later on this afternoon. So, like I say, cameos. Denise Welsh. So she had a very small part in this. It was one of her very, very early jobs. So Denise Welsh enters and she says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know we had company." And the blokes, he says, "So this is what goes on, is it? When I'm on the back." And she's like, "What goes on?" He goes, "I wasn't born yesterday. This bloke's even got his own key." And then Oz steps in. He says, Hold on. I think there's been a bit of a mix-up here. He says, yes. He says, "Yous live here now, do you?" And he says, "What does it look like?" And he says, "Well, you see, the last time I lived in Newcastle, this was my gaff, see? So I just naturally assumed my wife and my kid would still be here." And he goes, and he says, Osborne, does that ring a bell? Osborne, my wife's called Marjorie. And she says, "That's right, that was the name of the previous tenant, Douglas." And he says, "There you go." He says, "In fact," "there's a lot of mail, a lot of post here for her." And he says, "Did she leave a forwarding address or out like that?" And he says, "No." And Moxie says, "Oz." And he goes, "What?" And he goes, "I reckon we should go and find somewhere else to doss tonight." And Oz says, "I'm not interested in finding somewhere to doss, man. I'm interested in finding me kid." And Douglas says, "I suggest you ask the neighbours, and I'll have that key if you don't mind."
I love Douglas's tone. It's just great, isn't it?
Well, I mean, yeah,
he's great.
Be a bit shirty, wouldn't you, if someone had just bowled in your gaff? Anyway, so they cut to Neville's house, and the exterior of Neville's house, that is, again, a real house in Newcastle. It is in Biker. And hold on, let me just go back in my notes here. I did write it down. So yes, Nev's, it's in a street called Beresford Gardens in Biker. So there you go. So that's Neville's house. So they are so Neville is in bed with his beautiful young Brenda.
Yeah. With rather nice breasts. Yeah.
And he's trying to have himself a little bit of fun times with his beautiful wife. But unfortunately, she is none too impressed because Wayne's there. And she says, "No, Neville, not here." And he goes, "What?" And she goes, "It's not the right place." And he goes, "In our bed, in our house, at night? Where would you rather do it? At the squash
club?"
And
he keeps giving her a dig about that, doesn't he, all the time?
Yeah, well, that's it, yeah, because she was playing squash, or was it badminton with doctors? Anyway, she goes, "Wayne's here." And he goes, "Well, what's that got to do with Wayne?" She goes, "I'm not doing it with him in the house." And he goes, "Why not?" And she goes, "Because he'll hear her." And he goes, "He'll not hear us." And she goes,
And then you can hear he's in the bathroom and you can hear him gargling. And she goes, well, we can hear him gargling, so he'll certainly hear us. Well, he can, he can hear her. And she's just not at all game for fucking getting it on while Wayne's in the house. And Neville straight away says, if you'd mentioned this last night, I certainly wouldn't have asked him to stay. And she goes, well, you should have thought it through. She goes, oh, Neville, it's just too inhibiting. And he says, well, you never used to say that before we're married, when I used to come round your parents' place. She goes, that was different. My parents went to bed very early and they were sound sleepers. Mm-hmm. And you used to have Match of the Day on full volume. And you used to watch it.
Watch it.
A bit of a dig coming in there. And Neville says, Wayne will not be listening, man. That Sony Walkman never leaves his ears. I mean, how's he going to hear us with Twisted Sister blasting into his brain cells? And she's like, he might. And he's not, man. And then he makes the mistake. Yeah, he says, it's not like we're noisy, Bren. It's not as if you're a screamer. She goes, and he goes, well, you're not like one of them frenzied females you hear about, you know, that scream and shout and bark. And she screams, bark? Do you want us to bark? And he goes, shh, Brenda, Wayne'll hear us. So he's hoisted by his own petard there. So they cut, and we see Den and
with the girlfriend.
With his new girlfriend, who we find out is Christine.
Mm.
Now, let us just take a pause there 1 second while we go back. Another cameo.
Yes.
So,
a famous wife, a wife of the cast.
So, yes. So, Dennis is in the car with Christine, who was played by Madeline Newton. And Madeline Newton is married to
Kevin Whiteley.
So, yes, this is Kevin Whately's wife. Now, she's not the most prolific actor on IMDb. She has 17 credits.
Oh, she was in When the Boat Comes In.
There
one of my favourite.
You're on fucking fire today.
That's one of my favourite 70s shows. I loved it. I watched it all the time.
Well, she was in 30 episodes, which was probably all of them. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, she was a main character in that. She was brilliant.
And she got married to the main guy as well.
Yeah.
Again,
she was fantastic. Yeah.
I never watched it. It was in 70.
I did.
It was in 76. That was the year.
Yeah. And I've actually, this probably sounds a bit sad, but I've actually rewatched the whole series from beginning to end. I mean, it's just such a good series.
Well,
it's fantastic.
You know what? I might even try and acquire that and have a look at it. But a bit of heritage there. So yes, she was when the boat. Now there was also a thing, and my mother was desperate for me to mention this. So she was
in Boone as well.
She was in Boone. However, there was a thing that her and Kevin Whately were in again, which was like an educational program. It was part of the Luke and Reed series that they used to basically. What they used to do is they used to have a book. And they would get these, it was like a TV program and a book, and they would get you to watch the book. And there was one called Geordie Racer, and there was 10 episodes. This one called Geordie Racer, and it was about a racing pigeon in Newcastle. Uh-huh. And it was one of those things that, like I say, my mother was a school teacher, and she, had to do this at school with her school. So what they would do is they would either watch, they would read a bit of the book, and then they would watch the TV.
TV. She was in Inspector Morse as well. She's done a couple of episodes of that, I think.
Inspector Morse, Boone, Coronation Street, and Grange Hill.
Yeah.
So yes, Madeline Newton, Kevin Whately's wife, and they've got 2 children together. So, obviously, they pull up, and she goes, "Thank you for a lovely evening." And Dennis is saying, Dennis wants to get a bit of action.
Yeah.
Dennis is
Can't blame him there.
Yeah. He goes, it's not over yet, is it? And she goes, oh, come on, Dennis. And what I think she says, again, I'm sure she says, you hate dancing. So I think she's sort of being a bit sarcastic. Dennis is trying to say it's not over yet, coming in for a shag kind of thing. And she says, oh, but you're going to take me dancing. You hate dancing. And he goes, I know that, but I thought you could come inside And, you know, I can show you my favourite bits of Love Me Tender. That's quality chat up line there, Dennis. And she goes, oh, I don't think so. I've got to be up early in the morning for work. And he says, it's only 11:30. And she says, it's not just that. And she's obviously talking about the fact that Dennis lives with his sister. And he says, don't worry about our Norma. He says, I'll tell you what, I'll take her down to the cellar and chain her up against the wall. Chain her up against the wall, eh? And she goes, okay, but you know what I mean, though? It's her house. I just don't feel very comfortable, that's all. And he says, I just haven't seen you for ages. And I'm off to Spain in a couple of days. I just thought we could have a chat. It's now he's like, oh, I just want to have a chat.
Chat. Yeah.
And it works, and his little wily ways work, and she goes, well, perhaps a coffee. So he says, great. And then he starts to undo her seatbelt, and he's trying to get a bit touchy-feely in the car. And then all of a sudden, she screams, ah! And she goes, 2 horrible men. And she's right, it is 2 horrible men, because it's Oz and Moxie. And Oz says, any chance of a cuppa? And you can see the look on Dennis's face. Dennis has gone from just about to get a bit of action with a hot bird to having Oz and Moxie lurking around his gaff. So they go into the house. They go into Norma's house. And obviously everyone's being quiet and whispering apart from Oz.
Shouting.
As we expect. And Dennis is whispering. He says, you know, just put that down. And Oz kicks the fucking door. And he says, shh. And then Oz drops his bags really loud and screams at the top of his voice, who's the tart in the car? And says, shh, just keep your voice down. My sister's asleep. Get in there. And Moxie says, I hope we didn't sabotage any romantic tete-a-tete. And he says, well, you didn't help. And Oz says, who was she saying? The tart in the car. You know, that's his new girlfriend, the tart in the car.
In the car, yeah.
And he just says, nobody you know. And he goes, well, obviously. He says, if I knew if she was, I wouldn't be asking who she was, would I? And he says, the Carla Christine. And Moxie says she had a very nice motor. And Oz says, where's your lass? Keep her glasses down. And he picks up a bottle of whiskey off the side. Get the fire on, Moxie. And Moxie says, nice house. And Oz says, ooh, lovely. He says, that's Draylon, I think, talking about the sofa. And so Dennis says, so what do I owe the dubious pleasure of your company to then? And Oz says, hey, Dennis, he goes, I happen to have had a particularly fraught day today, I'll tell you. He says, well, he can tell you. Tell him what sort of day I've had today, Moxie. Just turns around and he goes, particularly fraught, Dennis. And he goes, well, why was that? Was the Portland shut for renovations, was it? And Oz goes, ha, ha, ha. And Moxie straight away starts spilling the beans. He goes, no, it's his Marjorie. She's done a runner. And he goes, what are you talking about? And Oz says, well, what is he talking about? What's he talking about? What he's talking about is, you know, my flat, my home, Gans run there, and Marjorie doesn't live there anymore.
I think there's a bit of a connection, isn't there, with Jimmy Nail released a song, didn't he, in 85, Love Don't Live Here Anymore.
There you go, George. I tell you what, you're full of them today, George. Yes. So Jimmy Nail sang the song, which was it? I don't think it was an original. Was it a cover? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was a cover. Yeah, but it was a hit. It was top 10.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, people forget how big Jimmy Nail was.
Yeah.
Remember the song "She's Lying"? I don't want nobody else.
Oh, I love that.
She's lying.
That gets my Alexa. I hit that on Alexa many a time. Yeah,
hey, George. Yeah, well, they used to have it on the jukebox in this pub back when I was a pisshead. There was a pub in town me and mate used to drink in the sun, and it used to be on the jukebox, and they would fucking hate it because as soon as I'd had a few drinks, I'd go and put loads of put all the Jimmy Nail.
Well, I'm still a pisshead, and I still play it.
So, and he says, you know, so yes, you're correct. So he said, so the title of the episode, Marjorie Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Yeah, because this was 86. He had the hit in 85, didn't he? So,
you know, Love Don't Live Here Anymore.
Marjorie doesn't live here anymore. And they repeat the line, Marjorie doesn't live here anymore.
Yeah. It's repeated quite a few times in this episode, isn't it?
It is. Or like, more or less. So yeah, George, you're on fire today with your links. So that's it. So he says, my home, he says, gone round there today, and Marjorie doesn't live there anymore. And he says, did you try her mother? She must know. And he goes, aye, she knows, the mother. Not tell me though, would she? And Moxie goes, no. She said Marjorie's got a chance to do better, to better herself. Now, improve her life after Oz's years of neglect.
Bollocksing it all up.
And he's like, and Oz starts getting a bit. He's got, he doesn't like to have his faults pointed out. He's like, I'll read, Moxie, I'll read. And Moxie continues, and he says she doesn't want him showing up at this point in time and bollocksing it all up. And he goes, I'll read, Moxie, I'll read, man, Moxie. We didn't need the whole 9 yards, thank you. And he says, look, I'm not bothered about them. I just want to be sure my bairn's taken care of, that's all. And Dennis is straight to the point. He says, it's a bit late in the day for that, isn't it? And he goes, what's that supposed to mean? He goes, well, you've hardly been the doting parent, have you? And Oz tries to be offended. He goes, well, I've been abroad, haven't I? I've been working for the bairn's future. I mean, like, I've been working for the bairn's future. We all spunked every single penny that he's ever had. And Dennis just says, look, Oz, when you came back from the States, you came up here, but you mustn't have gone near that flat because you would have found all that out then. And Oz says, well, that's where you're wrong, Dennis. I'd only been back 4 hours, hadn't I? So I was still in the Portland. Then I bumped into Eddie Huggins.
Eddie Huggins. What a
skinful. And he goes, and I was telling us that their lass had told him that War lass had went to stay in Blackpool with her lass. And they dragged the bairns out of there. So I had to doss at me mother's that night. And then the next morning, I seen ye. And ye told us about the job and where the rest is history. And he says, well, look, tomorrow you can go to talk to Marjorie. And you go to talk to Marjorie's friends or go to that place where she used to work. And he says, not tomorrow, I'm worried about doing it tonight. And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, well, I need somewhere to keep, don't we? Well, I promised Moxie. And he goes, you don't mean here. He goes, look, you cannot, we've promised to put up Bomberman. And he goes, and I was like, a couple of nights. He goes, I just, just the night, that would be all right. And he goes, well, why don't you go to your mother's? He goes, me mother's, he goes, it's 11 o'clock at night. I can't knock her up. At this time, she's born 71 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, you should have thought about that before the pub shut, shouldn't you? And then there's the bang on the floor, the ceiling. Like, Norma's obviously not happy. And he goes, and he's talking about his mother. And he goes, I haven't even got her a present. So they cut to the next morning, and Oz
in the pants. He's doing a bit of scratching as well, it looks like.
Oh, he does a quality. I'm glad you noticed that, George. He does a fantastic bit of bollock scratching. He did his usual outfit. He's got his Y fronts and his vest on.
I think that's the same pants from Germany, isn't it? It looks like
very likely. And they talk the Open University's on the telly, and they're talking, and he says they never had an Open University when we were kids, did we? This is Moxie. Secondary modern for us. Was it with the wind?
I'll tell you what, I can remember that. That was the only thing on the TV at sort of 5, 6.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember it was you get up on a Saturday morning, and it was before the kid.
Yeah.
If you got
there'd be some bastard in a sort of long hair and a beard and pointing at things. Oh.
And like with them leather patches on the fucking tweed jacket and that, talking about physics or some bullshit. Yeah, because it was I remember if you woke up too early on a Saturday or a Sunday morning and you went downstairs before the cartoon started, it was like the fucking Open University, wasn't it?
Mm.
And so Moxie says, the wind coming in through the broken windows, teachers who didn't give a toss if he got O levels of postal. And he said, and Oz claims he has victims of the system, Moxie. But Moxie says, oh yeah, nowadays though, I mean, you can get up, stick the kettle on, sit in front of the telly, and 4 years later, they give you a degree in physics. Great. And Oz says, I think it's a bit more to it than that, I mean, getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to watch this sort of thing is not easy, is it? Oz, he sort of, you think he's going to say one thing and he says something, he says, oh, I think there's a bit more to it than that. Like, you know, you think he's going to be like, well, you've got to study and buy the books and da-da-da. And he goes, well, getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning is not easy, is it? And Moxie just goes, true. And then he says, what happens if the old man, he says, is on the something? I couldn't hear that word. And he goes, and they keep repossessing the telly. Your learning's cattle truck then, isn't it? Using that Cockney rhyming slang again, cattle truck. And he says, and Moxie says, oh yeah, he says, it's education though. He says, that's the key, isn't it? He says, you tell your kid that when you find him. And he says, oh, I will do. He says, it's the chip, you know, that's what's done all this, the silicone chip.
Silicone chip, yeah.
He goes, it's transformed the whole life as we know it, the chip. And that's when we see the fucking bollock scratch. And it's like a one-fingered bollock scratch. He sort of slips his middle finger into his Y-fronts and gives his fucking nutsack a good old scratch with the old middle finger there. Oh, yeah, quality bit of scratching of the bollocks there, Oz. And he says, technology, industry, manning levels. And Moxie says, don't they also make women's tits bigger? He says, oh, he says, it's got loads of different applications. And the door opens and Moxie says, who's that? And Norma enters. And you can see that Norma's not happy with having Moxie. I mean, well,
as you wouldn't be. Yeah.
Would anybody be happy with fucking with Norma and with Oz and Moxie on the sofa? And he says, morning. And she goes, I see you found yourself some breakfast. And he says, oh, he says, well, we'll replace it, you know. And Moxie says, where's Dennis? And she goes, he's with Ali Fraser. And he said, and Moxie says, oh, I thought you'd have gone to work. And she goes, I've been on the trail of his Marjorie. And he goes, oh, well, that's not your job, pet man. He goes, I'll get onto it once I've had a wash and a shave and that. She goes, well, if you'd like to know, your Rod is at Walker Street School. And if you could possibly get yourself together by about 4 o'clock, you might just be able to see him. So, Walker Street School. My mother used to be a teacher in Walker.
Oh, bloody hell. Okay.
At a school called Warrior Street School. There is no Walker Street School, but there is a Warrior Street School, which, you know, is it definitely supposed to be that? No. But I'm going to say it's a similar one. Yeah? The actual school, unfortunately, the school itself isn't in Newcastle. That school is a location in Nottingham. And it is Round Hill Primary School in Nottingham. And we see for the first time young Rod. He didn't continue a lot of acting. This was like his sort of one and only foray. And he is on Twitter. And I did try and send him a message.
Yeah, I remember you said, yeah.
But he hasn't posted on Twitter for about 3 or 4 years. And he lives in Edinburgh, apparently. But yeah, so we did try and get Rod on as a guest, but that didn't happen. So Rod comes out to school. However, little bit of a secret here. He's not the only Rod that we might get on as a guest, George.
Yeah.
But let's not say too much about that.
No. Let's keep that stum.
So Rod comes out to school and Oz screams, Rod. And he's like, Dad. And he goes, hello, son, yeah, I'll read. And we see the softer side of Oz coming out. Oz is pleased to see him. You know, granted, he's not been the greatest, you know, attentive father all of these years, but he's, you know, he seems pretty happy to see his son. And he says, you're shooting up, aren't you? And he goes, I wouldn't now. And he goes, well, look, come round. I've got a present for you. Come round the gate. And he says, so he's got the jacket. And he says, I didn't know if it would fit you. Like, he says, I didn't realise you'd be so big. Try it on. He says, this is a American jacket from America. And he goes, I know. And he goes, you know. And he goes, Miami Dolphins. He goes, aye. He goes, won the Super Bowl. He goes, wish you'd got us the Steelers. And he goes, what for? And he goes, well, I support them. And he goes, I didn't even know you'd have heard of them. And he goes, aye, Channel 4 every weekend. Favorite.
You know, I can remember this being shown on Channel 4.
Yeah.
I mean, I had no interest in it, but
Well, to be honest, I used to be a big Washington Redskins fan. To be honest, I'm one of them people that, look, it is what it is. American football, I take the piss out of the Yanks, right?
Yeah.
Every opportunity, because, well, they're Yanks.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And that's not casting aspersions in the 1% of listeners and viewers that we have in America. But when Americans start talking about American football being the greatest sport in the world, I always turn around and say it's not a real sport. And they go, what do you mean it's not a real sport? I go, well, it doesn't have a world championship. I said, you can only be a sport if you've got a world championship. And the fact that you're the only pricks that play it means that there's no world championship, and therefore it's not a real sport. It's a pastime or a game at best.
And they wear a lot of padding as well, don't they? Yeah. Not like our rugby players. Yeah.
So I do take the piss, but I used to quite like. I was a big fan of the Washington Redskins as a kid, but I am also one of those people that I believe that you get those. There's some people out there that they're like, I don't watch football or rugby. I only watch American football. Like they fucking suck Yanks off. So like them people that like they're born in Slough, but they really want to be American for some reason. They go around wearing the American football jersey and baseball and that, and like they're like, I love baseball and American football, and they go to America on holiday all the time, and you're like, you're not American. You're from Slough. Stop being a fucking bellend. Yeah, I hear kind of pricks. Anyway. So he says, Channel 4 every weekend, my favourite sport. And he says, what's happened to Newcastle United? And he goes, they're rubbish, which was true back in the day, and still is really. And he says, that's all right. Anyway, he says, look, I know I haven't seen each other for a while, but do you want an ice cream or something? He says, no, I've got to catch a bus home. And he says, what, does your man not come to meet you at the gates? And he says, I'm 10, Dad. I mean, 10. Can you imagine? I mean, I was walking to school and getting the bus to school all my life. But, I couldn't imagine letting my kid, my kid's 18 nearly now. I couldn't imagine letting him fucking go to school on his own when he was 10. Jesus Christ. I would have fucking been having heart attacks. Anyway, he says, all right, he says, of course. He says, well, how are you? He says, let's get you to the bus. And he says, my mum doesn't get out the tab factory till 5. And he says, where are you living now? And he says, Fenham. That's like that's the west end of Newcastle, which is near where I'm from. And he says, Sandro's house. And he goes, Sandro, and he goes, the bloke we're living with, he's Italian. He says, is he? He says, well, look, he says, I know you haven't seen much of us for the last couple of years, but there's reasons for that. I've got to go and grafting abroad, because there's no work around here. And well, you see, me and your mother, and he goes, don't like each other. And he goes, no, he says, it's not that. He says, it's just that, grown-ups tend to have their ups and downs. And he goes, well, she doesn't like ye. And he goes, well, I'll read, son. He goes, that is maybe, but that doesn't mean that I don't like you. And he says, that doesn't mean that I don't love ye. So from now on, from now on, was going to be seeing a lot more of each other. I'll read. And Rod says, aye. He says, you'll have to be quick. He says, we're going to live in Italy from next month. So dropped the bomb that they're going away. So we cut back to Neville's house. And Wayne is on the phone to Krista.
The lovely Krista.
Yes. Who again, if anyone knows the lovely Krista, please tell her to reply to the Instagram.
Yeah, I was looking at Instagram today. She was posting some pictures. Yeah.
The beautiful Krista. Don't turn me into a stalker and get her to reply to messages. Anyway, so Wayne, he said, he's talking in the phone. He says, no, I can't give you a number. I'm in the north of England, aren't I? He said, look, this and he's like, all right, if you can't, you can't. Okay. Give me love to your folks. And he puts the phone down. And Brenda says, hello, Wayne. Did Neville get you some lunch? And he says, yeah, we said a cottage pie with Debbie. He says, where is Neville? And he says, he's taking her down the park. She's a lovely kid. And she says, yeah, you fancy some tea?
And he says, if you're making some, and he says, here, look, and he gives her a tenner, I think. And he says, I used the phone, that should cover it. And she goes, I'm sure that's too much, Wayne. And he goes, well, I did wrap it on a bit, and it was to Germany. She goes, phoning your wife for you. Neville said she was in Germany visiting the family. And he goes, yeah. And she goes, fancy some toast, I'm starving. And he said, and he starts spilling his guts. He says, well, actually, Krista isn't visiting her parents. She's gone back there and she's pregnant.
Oh.
So, and Brenda says, that's wonderful. And he says, no, it isn't. No, it ain't. She says, she's not sure whether she wants to have it, but she is sure she don't want to stay with me. And he's like, I blew it, Brenda. He says, I say, I wanted to be married to her, you know, but I guess I'm just too immature to be married. And she says, other women. He says, yeah, look, the point of loving someone is to prove it to them, right? Which means giving all the rest of the birds the elbow, not responding to every bit of skirt that passes you in the street, not being tempted by by any bird that flashes you in the boozer, you know. I mean, I wanted it both ways, and that's out of order, isn't it? And she goes, I'm afraid it is, Wayne. And he says, look, he says, don't tell Neville about this. He says, I don't want the lads finding out. You're the only woman I've told about this apart from Hazel. And she goes, is Hazel one of the other women? He goes, no, Hazel, Barry's fiance. She goes, oh, Hazel, yes, sorry. Wayne laughs. He goes, it's funny, innit? He goes, I find it much easier talking to birds about this than fellas. I suppose it's the old ego, eh? And she goes, you know, Wayne, if you tell Krista what you told me and Hazel, well, that might make all the difference in the world. And Wayne says, no, it wouldn't. He says, not unless I changed, and I can't see that happening, love. He says, I mean, basically, I want every woman there is in the world, present company excluded, of course. Brenda pretends to be a little bit mock offended. She goes, ooh, thanks very much. And he says, no, he says, you know, it's not that I don't find you attractive. And then Wayne just starts digging himself a fucking hole here. And he goes, no, I mean, I wouldn't do it with a mate's bird. No, not that I wouldn't want to, because, you know, I mean, you know, with me, mate, and you, and you're very, and so we could, and he just, like I say.
Oh, he definitely would.
Well, surely any sane man would. Yeah. And anyway, the toast pops up, and that sort of puts a bit of a full stop on the end of Wayne's babbling. Yeah. He goes, I think I understand, Wayne. It's not uncommon in men of your age. You seem to feel you need to prove that your sexual magnetism still works. And he says, yeah, I suppose it's there. I suppose that's it then. And she just says, and she draws the line under it, and she goes, jam 'em all, mate. Yeah. So Oz they cut
at the factory.
We see Marjorie. So it doesn't mention it by name, but again, big shout out to my mother. So my mother provided me with some information when we very first started doing this, and now we've got to that specific episode. So Rod obviously speaks about her working in a cigarette factory. He goes, the tab factory, and they obviously cut, and she's in a cigarette factory. Now, there was a cigarette factory called Will's. It was on Coast Road near Wallsend. Now, so it's now, if you've got the correct amount of money, you could live there, because the factory was converted into luxury apartments.
As they all are now.
Yeah. So, but it was Will's Cigarette Factory, and my stepdad looked it up. So, big shout out to my mother and Alistair. He'd sent me through an email, and it was in 1985 that it closed down. So, I think it was 1985. Anyway, but yes. So it doesn't mention it by name, but the assumption is that Marjorie is working in Will's Cigarette Factory, which was on the Coast Road near Wallsend, on the east of Newcastle. So the foreman goes to Marjorie where she's working, and he says, Osborne, your husband is here to see you. And she goes, no, it can't be. It's been ages since I've seen that beggar.
Beggar, I love that, beggar.
He says he's your husband. And she goes, oh, is he Italian? He goes, Italian? No, he's from Baker if he's anything.
big lad with a hole in his teeth. And she goes, oh my God, it is me husband. And she walks away and she goes, Aurora, will you take over? And a friend comes over and starts covering her shift there. And she walks into the office and she's obviously not happy to see Oz. And she goes, well, look what's crawled out the brickwork. And he goes, hello, Marjorie. And she goes, when did you get back? He goes, I've been back in the UK a couple of weeks now. I came up here last night. Now, what's all this about ye going to Italy? And she goes, who told you that? And he goes, the Ben told us that. And she goes, you've seen Rod? And he goes, yes, I've seen Rod. I went to his school. You don't mind, do you? I am his father, you know. And she says, if you'd have read the correspondence in the separation orders, you'd know you're not allowed access to him. And he goes, what correspondence? And she goes, you were sent copies of everything. And he goes, well, I've been moving around a bit, you know. And she goes, don't tell me. This is one of the reasons you're not fit to see him. Abandonment, my solicitor calls it. And he goes, I don't even care what your solicitor calls it. I'm not bothered about the legalese. I'm bothered about the kid. Right. If you take him off to Italy, I'm never going to see him again, am I? And she straight to the bone there. She goes, so what'll be different? And she turns her back on him. And he says, I'll tell you what'll be different. The kid'll be different, won't he? Because he's English, man. He was born here, his roots are here, and all his friends are here. How's he going to turn out being brought up in bloody, where is it? And she goes, Milano. Milano. I suppose that's Italian for Milan, is it? You're talking the language already. And she goes, and I mean, to be honest, she's not wrong when she says, look, he'll turn out a lot better there than living here. And who's this Sandro Gadji? And she goes, he's my boyfriend. And as soon as the divorce is final, he'll be my husband. And he goes, well, what sort of bloke is he? And again, straight away, she's welcoming the opportunity to get the jibes in. And she goes, well, he's not you, Oz. So that's a marked improvement. And Oz makes an assumption and he actually gets it right. He goes, a waiter, is he? She goes, how do you know that? And he's a couple of little racial slurs.
Yeah. Beginning with W. Yeah.
We'll forgive the racial slurs from the script. And he goes, well, it stands to reason, doesn't it? Any wop or chinky who arrives on time is bound to be a waiter. I mean, they didn't come here to build ships, you know. And she says, well, if he opened his own trattoria in due course, his dad's sick at the moment, and that's why Sandro's going back to help him with the business. And he says, so every time I want to see me kid, I've got to hop on a day flight to Milano, have I? And she goes, I've told you, you don't have access. And he goes, I can get a corner. I'm his legal dad, you know. And she goes, are you going to take me to court? Are you, Oz? She goes, I would love that. I'd love my day in the dock telling a few long overdue home truths. She goes, oh man, you haven't got a leg to stand on. You've been out of his life for 3 years. And he goes, I've been working abroad, haven't I? Had to go to Deutschland and then the Falklands. The Falklands. Don't tell me that wouldn't have an emotional sway with most of the courts in this country. And she's straight, and again, she's not pulling her punches. She tells it how it is. She goes, you weren't there during the hostilities. And he goes, I was there during the aftermath. What got us through was the thought of putting a few quid away for the band's future, which we all know that.
Well, no, isn't true.
Utter cod shit. And again, she's like, well, we saw precious little of it. Then you went traipsing around America. That must have made a hole in it. I mean, those boots can't come cheap. And he goes, oh, shut up, man, Marjorie, will you? Just shut up. Look, we can stand here and argue till we're blue in the face. It's going to do no good, because we can never agree on nothing. We never could, we never will, right? She goes, I don't care what you think, right? I just care about me Ben, and I want to hear it from him, all right? And she goes, well, you're not going, and she's obviously got the hump on. She goes, well, you're not going to us. You're not seeing him, and that's that. She storms out the office. So we cut to
the train.
We see
I say it looks pretty bleak. It looks pretty bleak, the old train station. Yeah.
So that, I mean, to be honest, Newcastle, that is actually Newcastle Central Station.
Yeah.
Train is pulling into Newcastle Central Station, And
reminded me again of Get Carter when he pulled up.
Yeah. So the inside of the train station has been renovated somewhat, and there's a few cafes and bars. It can be it is a wee bit grotty maybe, but the outside of the station is a very grand bit of architecture right in the centre of Newcastle. And it'll be a protected and listed building. And it's many. I'm assuming it's hundreds. When did they first build a train station? When were trains running?
1800s.
Yeah. So anyway, so like I say, the train pulls into the central station, and we see Barry getting off the train. But then we cut back to
Wayne.
Neville's house, and Wayne is getting ready to go out. And Brenda's giving him compliments. She says, "You've got very good dress sense, Wayne." And Neville's like, "You'd never let me wear anything like that." And she goes, "Well, you wouldn't suit a pet. Wayne's got the hips for it."
The slim hips.
Yeah. And he says, "Yeah, this place I'm supposed to be meeting Oz, the Anchor, what's it like?" And she goes, "Well, it's not the sort of place I go after dark." So it sounds like they're going to meet Oz in a rough old boozer, which we see is a very, very sort of delectable place that you and I might have frequented back in.
Yeah. We might have gone there. Yeah.
And what's that? What's the Flying Scotsman at King's Cross?
Oh,
that's not too far away from you.
No, that used to actually have sawdust on the floor.
Yeah.
And I used to go in there after work, and my work boots. I'd come home at night, and there'd be sawdust all around the rim of my boots.
Well, I remember when COVID first came out, someone made a joke, and it was actually true. It's like, it said, "I've snorted cocaine from the toilet seats in the Flying Scotsman at King's Cross. I'm immune to fucking coronavirus or something."
It's actually reopened now as quite a nice boozer.
Is it? No, because I remember when we used to do stag do's, it was the first place. You'd get off the train at King's Cross and you'd walk into the Flying Scotsman because the strippers were on. And strippers on at midday, wasn't it?
Oh, they were constant. It was like a rotating wheel.
Yeah. Anyway, so he says he's supposed to be meeting Oz, and she says it wouldn't go after dark. And he says it's not full of headbangers, is it? And then Neville says you'll probably go under the Princess after. And he's talking about the Tuxedo Princess, which is the boat that floated on the river.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned this before. Yeah.
Revolving dance floor. And it was just there. It was an absolute fucking meat market, an absolute fucking savage place. And yes, so it had a revolving dance floor on it. So when the tide was going in, so the boat would be leaning to one side, and then the dance floor was going round and round. So you're going round and round, but you're also going up and down like that. And then you're also pissed out your face as well. It was the cause of many a fucking scuffle, let me tell you. And he says, you'll probably go on to the Princess after. And then he whispers, he goes, it's wall-to-wall crumpet, wink, wink. And Wayne says, here, he takes the piss and he says to Brenda, he goes, here, mum. He goes, is it all right if I stay out till midnight? And she goes, not a minute later, mind. And he says, I'm only doing it for you, for you. He says, I thought you might like to be alone. And she goes, oh, there's no need to go out on our account, Wayne. And Neville straight away puts it, he says, yes, there is. Can you get him a key, please, Pet? And she goes, I'll get the spare. And he go, and Neville has a wee word with Wayne. He says, here, listen, if you pull tonight, didn't drag it back here, eh? And he goes, what do you take me for? And he goes, an animal. And he goes, yeah, but I wouldn't abuse your Brenda's hospitality now, would I? He says, maybe not now, but after a few drinks, it hasn't got a conscience, has it? Pointing to Wayne's little chap. And he says, now look, first of all, I'm not in the mood for chasing it, all right? And secondly, if I was, I've got a beautiful car with reclining seats and a lovely heater, so it's a bloody sight warmer than your spare room. So we cut to Barry, and so Barry is there.
I love this scene. It's one of the best.
So once again, one of our crew find themselves at Marjorie's old flat, and he knocks on the door, and Denise Welsh answers, Jean, and he goes, hello, you must be Marjorie. And she goes, I'm sorry. Now, this is the way it plays out is, 24 hours earlier, they had some fucking lunatics in there talking about Marjorie.
Yeah.
And then a day later, someone knocks on the door and goes, are you Marjorie? And she
poor old Douglas. I feel sorry for him.
And he goes, I'm Barry Taylor. You are expecting me. And she goes, are you a friend of my husband's? And he saes, that's right. Old mucker's me and him. Yeah, did he mention me? And she goes, just a minute. And so she goes in and she goes, Douglas. And Barry just walks in the fucking gap, like doesn't wait to be invited. And she goes, it's a friend of yours, Pet. And he opens the door. And, Barry's got a look on his face. He's like, oh, and then he's like, look, the look on his face changes. And Douglas, again, he goes, who are you? And he goes, Barry Taylor, where's Oz? And again, the penny doesn't drop when they were talking about Oz yesterday. And he goes, I'm terribly sorry. There seems to be some sort of mistake. Is this flat 23 Emmanuel, and I think he says Shinwell House?
Yeah.
He goes, aye, that's us, but there's no Oz. And he goes, Osborne. And he goes, and then the penny finally drops, which, I'm still dumbfounded it took them so long to realise that. And he says, Marjorie Osborne, no, Pet, Marjorie, and here we go. Marjorie doesn't live here anymore.
Yeah.
And he says, oh, that's bloody terrible. There's a whole bunch of us. And again, Barry loves a backstory, doesn't he? There's a whole bunch of us, and we're supposed to be staying with the 3 local lads. In fact, I made up the roster. Look, we ain't staying with Neville and Moxie and me. We're supposed to be staying here. And Douglas has had enough. He goes, well, I'm very sorry, because I'll sleep on the sofa and you can move in with the missus. And she goes, Douglas. And he goes, it's terrible. He goes, I've paid off the taxi. I've lugged me bags all the way up here because the lift isn't working, And Douglas has got the hump now. He goes, well, you can just lug them back down again, can't you? And Barry's terrified. He goes, on the streets of an area like this. And he goes, hey, mate, he goes, don't you rubbish my area. We live here and you don't. And he slams the door. And Barry, not taking the fucking answer, he fucking knocks on the door.
And they use a telephone.
If I could just use your telephone. So we cut back to Neville's house. And Neville says to Brenda, he says, is she asleep? Meaning the baby. And she goes, yeah, dead to the world. And they both have themselves a glass of wine and cheers. And she goes, oh, it's nice this, it's not too sweet. And then so Neville's obviously feeling a little bit frisky once again.
Yeah.
He says, hey, listen, he says, I've been thinking. He says, why? He says, we've not seen each other for a bit. Wayne's away out. The band's asleep. I thought maybe we could have an early night. And she says, 8:30. And he says, well, there's a note on the box. And she goes, I don't think I could get to sleep this early. Obviously, she's winding him up. And he's like, oh, yeah, Brenda, you know what I mean. She goes, oh, all right. And as it's a bit early, you better take the phone off the hook. And he says, all right. He says, I'll nip up and put the electric blanket on and all. And then we find out that young Brenda's had the same idea. She says,
she's done that. Yeah.
No need to do that. I did that 20 minutes
ago. Yeah.
She's got a very saucy look on her face there, George.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm sure you were quite enamoured with the saucy look there. So we cut to Norma's, and Dennis is looking for some records we see, and he says, Norma, and he says, yeah, and he goes, where have you put all of my records? And she goes, what? And he goes, when I moved in here, I brought a whole stack of records with us. I put them in that cupboard there. And just as if it's normal to give people shit away, she just goes, I gave them away. Like, now I know, right?
I think she said to Ethiopia, I think.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying, right, is this isn't Dennis's house. And so, he's moved in and it's not his house and then he's gone away and whatever. But like, me and my sister don't talk, right? But like, if I did that, like if I was staying at my sister's and she just went and gave some of my shit away, I would go fucking ballistic. And he's talking about, records, which are obviously quite valuable.
Yeah.
When I moved in, I bought a whole stack of records and I put them in the cupboard. And she goes, I gave them away. He goes, you did what? She goes, I either went for Ethiopia. And he goes, that was my collection, Norma. And she goes, well, the bands have left some cassettes around. He goes, look, man, I'm talking about classics. I'm talking about Janis Joplin, Creedence
Clearwater Revival.
Now, you, as a man that used to work in the record store, Joe,
Yeah.
I'm sure you probably know a little bit about that.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I had a great collection of records, but I sort of in the late 80s, I went and sold them. I'd signed Depeche Mode records. I'd all sorts of stuff. Yeah, stuff I wish I'd kept, but
probably worth a fortune these days.
Yeah.
Anyway, and she goes, "You can't tell me you were going to play them now." And he goes, "I was, as a matter of fact, She goes, "Well, if you're feeling nostalgic, Pet, why don't we get the family photograph album out?" I don't know if that's a bit of a jibe about something or not. But anyway, the phone rings. He goes, "That'll be Bomber." And she goes, "Are you picking him up?" He goes, "No, you can get a cab. It's a phone." And then he picks the phone and he goes, "It's a phone box. It's him." And then you hear him and he goes, "Barry, where are you?" And this is one of the greatest lines in the entire episode.
Yeah.
He goes, "I've no idea, mate. It's taken me bloody half an hour to find a phone box that hasn't been vandalized." And Dennis just goes, "Oh, you're in Newcastle."
You're in Newcastle.
You're in Newcastle.
Yeah.
And he goes, "I'm surrounded by drug addicts, muggers, and bloody rapists." He goes, "Oh, of course, we forgot you were supposed to be staying at Oz's, weren't you?" And he says, nah, him and Moxie are staying at his mother's. She'll not be on the phone. She'll be no room there anyhow. Well, we cannot manage to see you because my sister's already putting up Bomber. Why don't you try Neville? And obviously Barry says he's engaged. He goes, "Well, he cannot be engaged forever." And obviously Dennis has got the hump trying to sort out other people's problems. And he slams the phone down and he looks at the cassette that he's got, and he goes, "Banana bloody
Rama."
So we cut to Neville's and the doorbell rings, and it's like not just once, it's ringing and ringing and ringing. And Neville says, "Is that our bell?" And Brenda says, "Well, I gave him a key, he kind of lost it." And he goes, "It's only 20 to 10. He goes, "It's only 20 to 10. He goes, "It can't be Wayne." She goes, "Who is it then?" And he goes, "Well, I'm not a clairvoyant, Brenda." And the doorbell rings and he goes, "Aye, I'm coming. And he opens the door and it's Barry. And he goes, "Oh, thank God." And then straight away he goes, "All right, driver, thank you." And you hear the car drive off. And he walks in, he goes, "Warm, safety." And he goes, "Where have you sprung from?" And he goes, "Some place called
Gateshead."
Talk about the bleeding concrete jungle. And yeah, I mean, there are definitely blocks of flats in Gateshead where you wouldn't want to fucking go after dark. You know what I mean? There's some pretty fucking rough areas there. And Brenda says, "Neville," and he says, "It's just a minute, Barry." And she goes, "Who is it?" He goes, "It's Barry, one of the lads." And she goes, "What's he doing here?" And he goes, "I don't know yet, do I?" And then the baby starts crying. And he says, "I hope you don't mind, mate. I nearly bloody froze to death out there." And he says, "No, you're all right." He goes, "I'll get you a hot drink or something." And then he realizes, he goes, "Oh, you're in bed. I hope I haven't come at a bad moment." No. And he goes, "No wonder I couldn't get through. You left the bloody phone off the hook." So Barry has well and truly interrupted Neville's potential bit of passion.
Yeah.
How to get on with Brenda. So we cut to the pub.
The stripper.
What a fantastic fucking establishment this looks like.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
It seems like my sort of place, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, there was a
no one judges you.
No judgment, absolutely no judgment. So there was definitely a couple of boozers like this in South Shields. I used to live near one.
Yeah.
What was it called again? I can't remember. It was at the top of Lake, the Brunswick. That was it. There was a pub called the Brunswick at the top of Frederick Street in Leagate.
Yeah.
Up the road from there was another pub in South Shields that used to have strippers on like that. But there was. I didn't know of anywhere in Newcastle that had them. I'm sure if you lived in Newcastle in this time and you knew where there was strippers,
I would have been there.
Please feel free. Well, at this point, I was about 10 years old, so I wouldn't have been. You would have been there, George.
I would have been there.
But yeah, if you knew of any bars in Newcastle that had strippers on in such like, please feel free to email us in. So, like I say, there's a stripper on. Oz gets the drinks in, and Oz is actually sitting with his back to the stripper and not really paying it any attention. And he says, well, I'm sorry I'm not your genial host tonight, lads. I mean, any other time I'd have been happy to drag you.
And it has to be said, the stripper is opening her legs at regular intervals.
She is. And she's definitely trying to attract people's attention. And he says, normally I'd have been happy to drag you around the flesh pots of the Northeast, but it's just this thing with my kid. I mean, it's weighing heavy on us. And Wayne is not taking his eyes off the stripper. Him and you're transfixed.
As is Moxie. Yeah.
And he's like, I'm sure it does, son. And he says, I mean, I know what you think. I know what everyone thinks for that matter. You think that I'm irresponsible to kind of heed the ball. A bit of a, and Moxie goes, lunatic. And again, Moxie, like, Oz hears the truth from Moxie. And he's like, yeah, all right, Moxie, all right. And then he said, this is a great line. He says, you're not always rowing with all your oars in the water yourself, you know. And Moxie, he says, no, he says, fair enough. Sorry, Oz. And he says, but I'm still his fella, and I says, he's still my kid. And he turns round for a second and he looks at the stripper. And then he turns back again. He says, you've got to put yourself in my place. Wayne, man. And he's sort of Wayne, he tries to attract the attention. He goes, put yourself in my place with this business with a kid, man. He says, because you're married, aren't you? And he says, if your bird pissed off and left you, how would you feel, if she went back to Germany? And Wayne, a bit pissed, he's like, who you been talking to then? And he thinks his secrets have been spilled. And Oz is like, and he says, nay one, man. He says, I'm talking hypothetically. And obviously Wayne, Oz doesn't realise, many a true word is spoken in jest. Oz doesn't realise he's actually just hit the nail on the head. And Wayne says, oh, yeah. And he says, well, I mean, can you imagine if she had a sprog and she dragged him back to Dusseldorf? You'd never see it again. Can you imagine how that would feel? And Wayne sort of says to himself quietly, he says, yeah. He says, I can as it happens, because that is what is happening. So, but we cut back to Neville's, and Barry is there. Like, Neville's asleep. Brenda,
he's driving them all mad.
And he's boring the shit out of Brenda. And he says, you see, when I got back last weekend, I saw a very real change in Hazel. She was very warm and positive, and it was the most encouraging. And that's why I went off with the fellas in the first place, you see, to give her her own space, as they say. But then the following night, no, I tell a lie, it was the Monday. She goes on the Sunday, she went over to Dudley Point to see her gran who's had this hip. He loves a backstory, and he says, yeah, they got brittle bones at that age, and I think it's the lack of calcium in the water, and I often notice how dry my cuticles get. And Nev's like Sparko in the dressing gown, looking fantastic, and Brenda's like,
he's had enough.
So when you saw Hazel next, and he goes, oh yeah, he goes, I took her to this restaurant, you see, lovely place, best there is, El Pepe. Anyway, I was telling her about the problems we had with the conversion, and the trouble we had with getting the permission to turn it into timeshare units, and this conversion, and so on, etc., etc. And anyway, suddenly, in the middle of this crowded restaurant, because it's ever so popular, even on a Monday, she jumps up in the middle of a Zabagaloni and knocks a chair over and runs in tears to the lavatory. Brenda says, oh dear. And he says, what do you think, Brenda? Do you think these sudden mood shifts suggest a chemical imbalance in her metabolism? Do you think she should seek medical advice? And, so the very idea that it's anything wrong with him is so alien. He's like, he's got a chemical imbalance. And Brenda, a bit quite diplomatically, but she says, well, I think it's probably a bit simpler than that, Barry. I mean, maybe she's not all that interested in planning permissions and timesharing, etc., etc., etc. And Barry has a bit of a realization. He goes, do you mean I'm boring her? I never really thought of that. Am I boring you?
Boring you.
She's like, no. Anyway, so we cut to the bar, and Oz has got 3 pints, and the landlord screams, time, gentlemen, please. And Oz, he goes, right, I've come to a decision. And Wayne, you can tell, Wayne's absolutely slaughtered by now. He says, oh yeah, what was it? Indian or Chinese? And he goes, no, I'm talking about the kid, stupid. He gets out of school at 4, right? He goes, nobody meets him. And he's got to get to the bus, right?
Says, so all we need is a motor, right? And you've got one of them. So that's it. Job squared. And it's like a bit confusing. And he goes, hold on. He goes, what we got to do about it? What we're gonna
snatch the kid.
And he says, we're gonna snatch the kid. And I mean, that's they're talking about a kidnap here. And Wayne appears to agree to it fairly fucking quickly. And so the next day they cut to, and they're at the football field at the school. And obviously there's kids and they're playing in various colours. There's kids playing in blue and red with white red with white arms and whatever. Anyway, so the ball goes over and Rod sees that it's Oz and he says, Dad, what are you doing here? And he goes, well, you don't think I'd miss the opportunity to see you play, do you? He goes, here, listen. He goes, you were far too soft on that tackle. Never flinch the 50-50 ball, right? You got to get in, right? He says, I'll see you after the game, right? I'll be waiting for you. And he lets know some information which scuppers Oz's plan. He goes, aye, so is Sandro. And he goes, what, Wayne? He goes, over there by the corner flag. And Wayne comes over, he says, look, I've moved the carts up by the railings. And Oz says, well, that's just as well because there's a bit of a hiccup. He says, what now? He says, Sandro's here. He says, what, the boyfriend? He says, aye. He says, he's obviously here to take the kid yem after the match. And Wayne says, nothing else, we can't snatch the pair of them. Wayne's like, we're not snatching both of them. Like I say, Wayne's agreed to a kidnappers far too quickly, in my opinion. Can you imagine that? Like, imagine if one of your mates just fucking rang you up or said to you, guns, can you help us kidnap me kid? You'd be like, no, fuck off. And he says, that's Harry, didn't panic. He says, I'll go up and engage him in conversation. He says, because I want to give him the once over anyway. And Wayne says, well, what am I supposed to do? He goes, well, look, he says the kid knows I'm here. I'll read. And he says, because I've been having a bit of crack with him. He says, so when the whistle goes, he says, you get over and explain who you are, tell him you're a mate of mine, and tell him that you've got the car. And he goes, hold on. He goes, I don't know what he looks like, do I? And he says, he's playing number 7 for the Reds. And Wayne just says, number 7. And Oz sidles over to Sandro. And Sandro's shouting advice. He's like, hold the ball. And then he says something in Italian.
Running.
Yeah. And then he shouts more and that's it. He says, in England, always the long ball, running. And Oz says, hold on, there's some talent out there, son, And he goes, of course, he says, but the look of the boys, they're 8 to 9 and 10 years old, okay? And he says, yes. And he says, all they do is play the grown-up field. And Oz is like, so what like? And he says, it's too big. All they learn about is space, running. In Italy, they play on the streets, they play on the beach, and they learn to pass, they learn to control, they learn to hold the ball. And he says, aye, well, he says, I suppose you've got a point, like. He says, however, in Inglaterra, they learn stamina and different. And he says, which is bloody handy when you're playing the longest football season. And he says, you're playing the longest football season in the world, kidder. And Sandro, he says, too long, too many games. Anyway, so Rod scores a goal and they both cheer. And Oz, he says, see the way that number 7 just slipped into the 18-yard box, straight in. And Sandro, he goes, that's my boy. He goes,
yeah.
Anyway, the whistle goes. Both games are finished. And there's, like I say, there's one team, like Oz has said, he's the number 7 for the Reds, but there's one team that's playing in red, but they've got white sleeves. And Wayne says, excuse me, you, number 7.
He steams straight over there, doesn't he? Grabs him.
Yeah, and he goes, you played a right stormer, you did. And the kid's like, thanks. And he goes, your dad was well proud of you. And I mean, it's scary how easy it is for Wayne to get this kid at the car.
Yeah.
He says, me dad? Yeah, he says, yeah, of course he is. He told me to come and fetch you. Come on. Anyway, so Oz is back. Oz is back with Sandro, and he goes, so what? He says, so what? You come here every week and watch every game, do you? And he says, he goes, he says, today they don't play so good. He said, but last week, the boy got the hat trick. And And he says, get away, the bugger. He says, all right.
It's got one thing got to be said. He's Sandro. He's been in quite a few things as well, hasn't he?
George, you read once again. You read
Vincenzo Nicolai.
Yeah, Vincenzo Nicolai. He's got 96 credits on IMDb.
Yeah, he's been loads of stuff, hasn't he?
He was in Dempsey and Makepeace.
Yeah.
One of our favourites. He was in Boone.
Yeah.
He was in the film Buster with Phil Collins.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
He was in the film Alien 3.
Yeah.
Shine on Harvey Moon. Diesel and Pasco, that was written by our guest Stan here. He was in the Bill, Grange Hill, Hustle, Spooks, The Dark Knight, a good film, Holby City, EastEnders, and was in Captain Phillips, that thing, that film with Tom Hanks about the Somalian pirate.
Yeah.
So yes, he's had a fairly decent career. And a lot of the stuff that he played was like Giuseppe in some, you know, like if there was a requisite for a talking Italian in an English TV show, he got the part.
He was the man.
Yeah, he's done that. So
anyway, we diverse. We
do. And so anyway, Wayne leads this, takes this lad to the car, and he says, right, here we are. And he goes, is this your car? BMW 520. And he goes, and the kid says, it's a great motor. He says, yeah, well, jump up in. Your dad's up the road and we'll go and pick him up. And then Oz jumps in the car and he says, right, burn rubber. And the car spins off. But literally 50 yards down the street, they hit the brakes.
Yeah.
And Oz goes, so who are you? And he goes, I'm Terry Atkinson. And he said, and Oz goes, that's not the kid. And he goes, he's not me dad. And Wayne goes, oh, bloody hell. And he goes, I thought it was funny. Me dad's on the oil rigs. And Oz goes, he goes, well, you had no business getting in this man's car, did you? Let that be a lesson to you. Never take lifts off strange men. And Wayne says, even if the car is a BMW. And he goes, who are you looking for? And he goes, what? He goes, nobody. He goes, me and him's school board inspectors. We go around schools testing kids like you on their reflexes about things like this, and you've just failed. And Wayne just says, failed. And he goes, miserably. However, we'll forget about it this time on the condition that you say nothing to your friends and we'll say nothing to the headmaster. And they convince the kid, and he says, great, thanks a lot, sir. And he goes, right, okay, now watch the road. So the kid, Terry Atkinson, gets out. And Wayne says, you great big pillicos. And he goes, me? He goes, you're the one that snatched the wrong kid. And he goes, you're the one that told me number 7. He goes, aye, but you pinched the wrong number 7, didn't you? The one off the other game. He goes, how was I supposed to know? I've never set eyes on your bloody kid. And he goes, look, for future reference. He goes, you must be bloody joking. And he drives off. And then Sandro and Rod are leaving school. And he goes, Rod, your father, you sure he was here? And he goes, of course I am, Sandro. I seen him talking to you, man. So the lads are at Neville's after Oz's failed attempt at getting his kid. And Dennis is like, you do these things on the spur of the moment, man, Miles, without even thinking them through. I mean, where are you going to take the lad? And he goes, well, I wasn't going to hang on to him, man. I only wanted 24 hours with him to find out how he feels about this trip abroad, man. Find out how he feels about this Sandro gadget. And she wouldn't let us the van. So I had to do what I had to do, didn't I? And Bomber says, well, she'll be less disposed to let you see him now. And he says, and Barry says, oh, so you met the Italian in question, did you? And he says, aye, we exchanged 1 or 2 words, yes. And Brenda says, what sort of person did he seem then, Oz? And Oz says, well, he seemed perfectly affable and pleasant and polite. But I mean, you can't gan on that. He's a waiter. He's trained to be. Like Oz is talking like he's some kind of undercover operative, like he's a trained operative. And Wayne says, oh, come off it, Oz. You said in the car he seemed like a nice enough bloke. And Oz says, aye, them's were my first impressions, weren't they? But then this is a class line. He goes, he's got to be a bit macey if he wants to be, if he wants to lob up with my Marjorie, which is true. She's mental. And And anyway, so Brenda offers to do another pot of tea, and everyone says yes, and she goes into the kitchen, and Neville says, I'll give you a hand, and she says, no, I'll do it, Pet, and she goes into the kitchen. Anyway, so Dennis says, so when do they leave then? And he goes, next week. And Barry says, if you ask me, just my opinion, like, I think living in Italy might benefit the lad. I mean, he'll have the climate when he comes back. He'll be bilingual, a wonderful advantage. Only spent one night in the area, and I'll tell you, it was bleeding terrifying experience. Anyway, they're pretty up. They're upset with Barry slagging off Newcastle, and then it says you can't judge a place by one night. And Oz is like, what's wrong with the place, like? And he says, we've all seen Wolverhampton. It's not exactly Beverly Hills.
Beverly Hills.
Anyway, so Bomber takes the mugs out into the kitchen, and Brenda's doing the washing up, and he says, here you are.
You can see how big Bomber is here, can't you? Compared to when he's standing next to her. Yeah, he's a massive guy, isn't he?
He's an absolute lump. Yeah. And she goes, you didn't need to do that. I've seen it. He goes, that's all right. Just glad to get out of the smoke. And he picks up the tea towel and he starts drying up. And she goes, oh, you've not left your wife, have you? And run off with a sailor. And he says, if I do, you'll be the first to know. And she goes, honestly, it's been like Heartbreak Hotel this week. I'm thinking of leaving my job at the hospital and taking up marriage guidance. And she says, well, we'll be off in a couple of days and you can get some peace and quiet. And then Neville comes in and he says, Brenda, and she goes, the kettle's not ready yet, Pet. And he goes, no, could you come and have a word with the lads, please? So Brenda goes into the living room and Bomber takes over the dishes. And Dennis says, Brenda, we all agree we think Oz has got a case here. I mean, we think that he should see his young lad before he's whisked off to a foreign country. And she goes, oh, I quite agree, Dennis. And she goes, and he says, but the main problem is the situation with Marjorie. Delicate to say the least. I mean, she has to understand that Oz seeing his son won't be a threat to her. I mean, that's only right and proper. And she's like, And then he drops the bomb and he goes, so we thought the best way to convince her would be if you had a word.
Talk to her, yeah.
So we cut and we see, so Brenda and Marjorie are in a bar/restaurant.
I love the Italian restaurant. It's brilliant.
Now, did you actually notice that it is, if not,
it's similar to the other place, the cocktail bar they're in.
There we go. So it's similar, if not the same place.
There's just a few Italian bottles hanging about the place.
So they basically, it was similar, if not the same, as because obviously we know it was different because in season 1 they were filming in Elstree and this is being filmed in Nottingham. So, it is a different place, but they obviously either kept the same set or, but they may even be trying to insinuate that Marjorie pulled the waiter in season 1 and she's now going out with them in season 2. But it's very, very similar to the bar where Brenda and Marjorie and Vera drank in season 1, in series 1. So anyway, so they're sat at the table and Sandro's got a bottle of wine and he says, who wants to taste? And she says, you're the expert, Pet. And he says, shall I let it breathe? And she goes, don't be daft, man. We just want to hurl it doing our necks. And he pours the drinks.
That's a good Geordie bird, yeah. Get it down your necks, yeah.
Well, cheers, Pet. And they chink glasses and she goes, I tell you something, Sandro's the only dad Rod's ever had. He's wonderful with him. He teaches him things. He talks to him. He explains things. And Brenda says, well, actually, in spite of all of the circumstances, Oz admitted he quite liked him. And she goes, oh my God, that's what Sandro said. She goes, I'm telling you, Brenda, I couldn't stand it if him and Oz got pally. So Brenda gets home after being with Marjorie, and Wayne is sat all alone in the living room. And he goes, oh, hello, Brenda. And she goes, hello, Wayne, are you on your own? And she says, the lads have gone down the pub. I said, I'd babysit. And she says, that's nice of you. And he goes, I didn't fancy it. And I wanted to speak to Krista, sort of privately. And he gives her another tenner. Remember them big old brown tenners?
Oh, God, I remember them well.
Yeah, we used to call it a brown spot, didn't we? That was like what we used to call a £10 note, or like a brown spot cash jackie.
Oh, it used to be a night out. That was great.
Yeah. Well, but we used to so a £10. So the fruit machine used to have a £10 jackpot.
Yeah.
And we used to call a £10 either as it was either a brown spot or a cash jackie, because it was it was either £10 in cash or £20 in tokens. And so anyway, he gives her one of them big old tenors, and she goes, "I'm sure that's too much. We're in a cheap rate after all." He goes, "Yeah, but there was quite a lot of heavy dialogue tonight." And she goes, "Oh dear." She goes, "Look, there's some Cointreau on the sideboard over there. Why don't you pour both one?" And she says, "So has she come to any decision yet?" And she goes, "Yeah, she's going to have the baby." And she goes, "Well, that's a relief. I'm glad." He says, "But she ain't going to have me back. So the good news is I'm going to have a kid by the woman I love, but the bad news is I'll probably never get to see it." And Brenda says, "It's ironic, isn't it, that you and Oz have similar problems?" And he goes, "How did you get on with Marjorie?" And she goes, "Well, she's agreed to let him see the boy. Took 2 bottles of Chianti though." And he says, "You are a marvel, you are, Brenda." She says, "Do you fancy hopping over to Dusseldorf, do you? Do the business with Krista." So there is some samba music playing, and we cut, and it's basically the river time. And
hit the time.
Yeah, and Oz is basically being with Rod, and they're on the banks of the River Tyne near the shipyards, etc. And he says, "This is where your granddad used to work." And he says, "Yeah." He says, "Well, not exactly here." He says, "Not here exactly, up the river, Wells End, Slipway." And he goes, "I never knew me granddad." And he says, No. He says, "He was a riveter, hard man, proud man, but the job killed him in the end. And that's why you never got to meet him." And he sort of, he's got a bar of chocolate and that. He says, "It's funny." He says, "He built ships that went all over the world, and yet he never left Tyneside." He says, "I think that's how I become a bit of a wanderer, I got a bit of the jippo in us, because I said to myself that when I was your age, I said, that's never going to happen to me." He says, "Mind that I'm afraid of hard grafting out like that. It's just, there's a great big world out there." And he goes, "I know, Dad." And he says, "Well, that's how it's come that I'm pleased about you going to Italy." So Oz has come round to the idea that it's a good idea. And he says, "That's how come I'm pleased about you going to Italy. And now that how you're feeling about it, because it's got to do you good, hasn't it, really? You'll come back, you'll be able to parlay amor Italiano, as they say, give you an idea what the world's about, and it'll improve your ball control, doesn't it? Eh?" And he laughs for a second. He says, "Me teacher says I'm very fortunate." He says, "Aye, well, your teacher's right for once." He says, "I'll miss me friends though." And he says, "He says, you'll make new ones anyway. You'll be back, won't you?" He says, "You couldn't leave this for long, could you?" Yeah. So you see them, and they're with some donkeys in a field, then they cut, and they are at a bus stop, and they're
on that road again. They're on that road again.
Well, so where they are, that street they're on is called the Sand Hill, which is. So where he stood there on the corner under the Tyne Bridge, directly behind him is the bridge. Is the pub I used to work in.
Oh, right. Oh,
so they're on the quayside, and the bridge is going over the top there. And so if you basically from directly behind where they're waiting for the bus stop, is the pub I used to work in, Offshore 44, and then over to the left is the pub that they went.
Well, you weren't doing the bar there or the door?
No, this was when I started out as a glass collector, and then worked on the bar. Yeah, this was when I was like 17, 18, yeah. I didn't start doing the door until I come down here. So, like I said, where he is, he's on the corner. Behind him is Offshore 44, and if you went up to the left, you would have that pub that they went in at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, okay.
And the bus comes round the corner, and it's number 35 bus, which goes to Chapel Park via Osborne Road. And
Osborne Road, yeah.
Osborne Road is in Jesmond, so yeah.
Is that a real place, Osborne Road?
Yeah.
Oh.
So Osborne Road is a big road going through Jesmond. There's a lot of bars and hotels and restaurants. It's a really nice place, yeah. And like I say, Chapel Park's just another area of Newcastle in sort of northeast of the city, sort of, yeah. And yeah, so that's a real bus with a real destination,
everything written on the front. And anyway, so they're stood at the bus stop, and he says, I don't want to wait 6 months for a postcard, I'll read. And he says, well, have a great time. And Rod gets on the bus and he says, but here, listen. He says, you might be a man of the world now, but never forget your roots, son. And this is where he's sort of getting all emotional. And he says, you'll always be a Geordie, no matter where you go, because this is the place what shaped you, made you what you are. I'll read. And if you notice, Rod, he says, he buys a bus ticket and he says to him, he says, ciao, Dad. It's Italian. He says, ciao, Dad. And then the bus door.
And then Oz says something quite unique, doesn't he?
Yes. And the bus door closes and the bus drives off. And in a very sad way, he says, Auf Wiedersehen.
Wiedersehen. Yeah.
And that is the last words of the episode. And that is the last time Oz will see his son until many, many years down the line.
Yeah.
Like I say, we will talk about that at a later date. So just out of interest, at that time, I'm pretty sure that the bus fare that he would have just paid that bus driver was 5 pence. When I was
how much?
5 pence.
Oh.
So a child bus fare when I was a kid and I was first started getting the bus on my own.
Yeah.
A child bus fare in Newcastle was 5p.
I think it was one. It was 1 guinea when I started.
Fucking hell!
It was a groat. One groat.
A shackle. And then it went up. Then it went up to 10p. Went later on down the line, but yeah. So
10 groats.
Yeah. So that's it. So again, very much, less of the comedy towards the end there, and more, like I say, trying to show Oz as not the cold-hearted, that he is, and as much as he's not the greatest father in the world, he still did love his kid. So the credits come up, and who gets a whole page credit this episode is young Brenda, Julia Tobin. And did you see the picture that they used for Brenda's credit?
No, I didn't see that.
George, if you're interested, I suggest that you go back and look, because she's wearing a top without a bra and it looks a little bit chilly in the picture.
Well, I might do a bit of research for that.
I'd have to go back and do a bit of research. So yes, so Brenda gets a whole page, her own credit. And then we've got the next credit is Norma, Marjorie, and Christine, which, like I say, so Norma is Jimmy Neal's sister, Marjorie is obviously Marjorie, and Christine is Kevin's Waitley's wife. And then we've got Douglas and Jean, who are the occupiers of Oz's flat, which again, as we talked about, is Denise Welsh, and Sandro gets a credit. And then finally, we've got the foreman in the factory. We've got Terry Atkinson, the kid, and Rod, who was played by someone called Barry Hollinshead, who, like I say, we did try and reach out to, but he's not been on Twitter for quite some time. But it does say on his Twitter, played Oz's son, the original version. So he is still pretty proud of it. So that is it for this week's episode. Marjorie doesn't live here anymore, and Love don't live here anymore, which was Jenny Neal's song. So that is it for episode number 21. So if any of our fantastic listeners or viewers have got any comment about today's episode or anything else, please do feel free to email us on Auf Wiedersehen Again @gmail.com. Remember to follow us on Instagram at Auf Wiedersehen Again Podcast. Our Twitter, please do follow us on Twitter at Auf Again. And please do like and share the Facebook page of Wiedersehen Again Podcast. And please do subscribe to our YouTube channel of Wiedersehen Again Podcast and click that bell, which will alert you to any new episodes. But like I say, if the visual content of mine and George's faces is you find it in somewhat offensive, which we would understand, you please do listen on audio, which is on Spotify, iTunes, Anchor, Google Podcast, Breaker, many, many more. All good podcast platforms. New episodes are released every Friday at 10 a.m. And our theme music, as always, is composed and performed by the guitar man Lee Dosky. So please do like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. As always, our sponsor is Top Gun Tattooing, number 12, the Harris Arcade in Reading. Oh, looks like George is disconnected there. You've only got me, but I will finish up. So our sponsors, number 12, the Harris Arcade in Reading, topguntattoo.co.uk, 01189 968. Oh, you're back, George. I think you went for a second.
You think you're frozen a bit there?
Yeah. Anyway, so we were just going through the sponsor, 01189 968 667. And remember, you get a 20% discount off any tattoo with Zach with a code word Hadaway and Shiteman. And remember, you can get a free Neville and Lottie tattoo for every single listener. That is, and remember, so we had our winner. Remember, the winner of our most recent competition, winner, chicken dinner, was Lynn Anderson, who did it on Instagram. So Lynn, if you are watching this, please do message us in with your address, and we will pop your prize in the post. And our next giveaway competition is the original signed picture copy of the in Dusseldorf. So that is it for today's episode. And please do tell your friends, spread the word, and tell everyone how fantastic the podcast is. Try and drum up a few more listeners. And so just as an interest, we have got less than 1% of our listeners are based in Oman in the Middle East.
So brilliant.
You are the list. I was looking at the geographical breakdown, and it's like 96% UK, like 2% America, and then like
brilliant.
Other areas. And so we've obviously got a listener who's in Oman.
Oh,
you're the listener.
Get in contact.
If you're the listener in Oman, email us in and let us know what you do out in Oman. So that is it for this week. So George, enjoy your trip down to, where was it? Margate?
Ramsgate.
Ramsgate, and the biggest Witherspoons available.
Yeah.
And we will see you next week. But until then, Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Oh, yeah, man. All out of options, nothing to choose. I fizzed out on Netflix, I'm sick of the news. I'd sign up to Sky, but